And welcome to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session for February 21st, 2019. The first item on our agenda is a call to the audience for issues for the issue review session and our committee of the whole items. Audience members have up to 3 minutes to address the City Council. If you would like to speak on an item, please fill out a speaker's card, which can be found in the back of the council chambers, and hand it to our city clerk staff. I see Tim back there, and we'll make sure we'll get your card so we can call your name when it is time. I do have a couple cards. The first one is Ryan Rubilla. Please come forward. Come down to the podium. State your name and place of residence for the record. I'm sorry, I can't read the spelling.
All right, Rublick.
Pardon me?
Rublick.
Rublick. Wow,
Yeah.
that's okay. Okay, thank you.
My name is Ryan Rublick. I live in Gilbert, Arizona. I coach for ASU, coach beach volleyball there, and I also run a juniors club for ages like 10 to 18. So yeah, I just want to speak on the volleyball courts on the north side of the Tempe Town Lake. It's definitely one of the fastest growing sports. Well, it is the fastest growing sport in NCAA history, and high school beach is a huge theme here. There's tons of high schools that are looking for courts. I know my club, among other clubs, would also love to have more court access, and Tempe is an ideal place for that because it's so centrally located. It's one of our preferred places to play currently, as it is even, but it's just not very feasible because the courts aren't really reservable and there's not a lot of them. So yeah, I just wanted to voice that. I think that you'll have lots of people fighting over those courts. They'll definitely get rented out and used quite a bit if yeah, you guys choose to go forward with that project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next is Brian Brinkerhoff. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Brian Brinkerhoff, Gilbert, Arizona. I don't know if you can tell, I'm actually here to talk about the beach volleyball courts too. I don't like jackets. I fight the weather. I feel like if I dress for warm weather, then the weather will follow me. Ryan back there is also coach of ASU beach volleyball. He failed to say that, but that beach volleyball is a big deal. I don't know how important it is to Tempe itself, but if it's on your vote, then I'm here to speak for it. I coach a club also, Volley for Life. I've coached it for about 5 years. I directed. I also coach high school. I've coached high school. I'm in my 6th year of high school beach coach. Last year, the school I coached won the Division I state title. Arizona is the first state in the nation to have beach volleyball as a high school sport. California was after that. Texas, Florida followed, and a few others are adding it. It's such an easy sport for some of the girls that we coach to get into and compete in. It's less expensive for some of the parents. The thing we need, Tempe Beach is one of our favorite places to play. It's centrally located, and I've played a lot of volleyball there. I know some high schools that have practiced there. I haven't used it for practicing because I'm out in Gilbert, but I can see the potential there. You got Mill Avenue that almost looks like Hermosa Beach Pier when you're sitting out there on the beach, and if you guys follow through with the plan you're doing, like I said, I don't think it's going to generate the revenue that ASU does, but it will bring people in. We will have tournaments there, and it's a good deal. So I only have 3 minutes. I could go on for a long time. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address us on any of the items for our issue review session and our committee of the whole? Could you please get my attention? I do not have any additional cards. Seeing none, close that portion. Next is item 2, which is our Human Services and Impact Report for fiscal year 17-18. And I call Naomi. I think Brandon's here. Octavia, good to see you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Naomi Farrell, Tempe Human Services Director. Joining me this evening is Octavia Harris, Tempe Community Council Executive Director, and Nathaniel Pretlow, the current TCC Vice President. Nathaniel is also the co-chair of the Agency Review Enhancement Committee, which oversees the agency review process. I would also like to acknowledge the Human Services staff and the TCC board members that are in attendance today. Today, we will be presenting to you the Human Services Impact Report for fiscal year 17-18. Historically, Mayor and Council received periodic Human Services updates throughout the year in two general ways. Annually, Tempe Community Council provided a comprehensive agency review impact report to share the results of philanthropic investment each year. Separately, Tempe Human Services Department provided updates and presentations on city-operated programs as needed. This approach provided relevant and timely information, but failed to provide a single, holistic update on the system of human services in Tempe. This year, Tempe Community Council and Tempe Human Services are jointly presenting a revised reporting format to deliver a more comprehensive picture of how the network of programs and services available in Tempe provide a system of human services. This revised reporting approach began by building upon the model of the Agency Review Impact Report and then expanding it to include the programs operated or administered by the City of Tempe. Additionally, we would like to recognize the numerous city departments and the multitude of community partners that all play critical roles in supporting a human services system for our city. Since developing a Human Services Department in 2014, Human Services and Tempe Community Council have worked together diligently to develop a comprehensive system of human services for Tempeans. The focus is to continue refining and balancing the services operated directly by the city with programs selected for funding through agency review, while also maintaining awareness of the third-party organizations simultaneously operating in the community. To assist in developing and analyzing a balanced system, a framework based on the three primary categories of service have been adopted. These categories are crisis, stability, and self-sufficiency. Today, we will present that framework and our accomplishments in fiscal year 17-18. This framework is well suited as an overlay for TCC's successful agency review process, which continues to allocate funding using the long-established 6 target populations model, which has guided equitable nonprofit funding for years. These 6 populations are youth, homeless, victims of domestic violence, working poor, individuals with disabilities, and seniors. This framework should position Tempe well to not simply serve people in need, but rather to help mitigate its causes. It is important to note that people in need of services do not interface with the system in a linear way and may only use services from one category. Additionally, some programs operate in more than one category but are listed under a primary category for ease of reporting.
Crisis is often the most visible category of the human services system and tends to draw more public focus than the other categories. Programs in the crisis category seek to rapidly provide access to services and resources that assist in reducing dangers to health and safety. This includes basic needs of food, shelter, and safety. For fiscal year 17-18, approximately 14% of all human services funding was dedicated to the crisis category of service. This includes 33 programs. The stability category of service provides services and resources for people who may not be in immediate crisis, but are also not currently self-sufficient. Resources and services seek to help people as they transition out of crisis or provide a safety net to prevent someone from entering into crisis altogether. This category includes resources like emergency home repair, housing assistance, mental health services, and employment assistance. Approximately 56% of all human services funding in FY 17-18 was spent in the stability category, and this includes 16 programs. And finally, the self-sufficiency category of the system includes programs which seek to establish the long-term health and vitality of Tempe's community. There's a diverse array of programs in this category, providing everything from financial literacy programs and support for seniors aging in place, to parenting classes and youth educational opportunities too. Community members may utilize self-sufficiency programs over time as they seek to improve or maintain their quality of life. Approximately 30% of all human services funding during fiscal year 17-18 was spent in this phase, and this includes 31 different programs.
Octavia, if you could click, yeah, try to keep up with where you are.
Sure.
Okay, this figure provides a comprehensive view of human services funding sources for fiscal year 17-18. Tempe Human Services is able to dramatically leverage the city's investment by securing additional external funding. For every dollar invested by the city, $2.17 of external funding were secured. The general fund is inclusive of both department operations and agency review funding. The property lease revenues category represents the non-reoccurring investment mayor and council made in the Tempe pre-program for the first year of the program.
This figure provides a comprehensive view of agency review funding sources for fiscal year 17-18. The $1 million figure in the general fund category is inclusive of approximately $200,000 of additional funding each year that council approved for 3 years. Fiscal year 17-18 was the first year to include this additional funding. The Tempe Diablos display panel category is separated from the broader general fund category to illustrate the impact the Tempe Diablos Stadium advertising revenues generate for the agency review process. Finally, the $30,000 from the Together Tempe Fund is the rebranded name of the program for charitable donations given via the water bill. In total, the fiscal year 17-18 agency review process made recommendations for providing approximately $1.2 million in grant funding for nonprofit programs serving Tempe's community. What really sets Tempe apart in this grant process is the drive and the intention to have community engagement lead the way. This was accomplished during fiscal year 17-18 with our incredible cadre of volunteers who live and or work in Tempe and dedicated over 20 hours of time in service, each over a 3-month period. Additionally, agency review volunteers were invited to see the agencies and programs in person. Staff visits about 1/3 of our partner agencies each year, including 13 for the fiscal year 17-18 year. Agencies that are new or have not received a site visit in the past 3 years are chosen for visits. Through the agency review process, the city invested over $1.2 million during the 17-18 fiscal year. As in years past, funds were distributed using the 6 target populations as 6 populations model of youth, homelessness, victims of domestic violence, working poor, individuals with disabilities, and seniors. In the graphic on this slide, you can see the types of services funded across each population, like suicide survivor support or youth, shelter for homeless, transitional housing for domestic violence victims, workforce development for working poor, job training for individuals with disabilities, and transportation for seniors. We would like to acknowledge TCC's support of the City Council's priorities and mention that the services provided across each of these populations support Council Performance Measurement 3.10 directly and align with a number of measures which are included in the memo to Council. Additionally, we would like to provide a visual for how distribution of agency review funds via the 6 populations model integrates with the broader perspective of human services as a system. Here you can see the resources and services provided within each of the 6 target population address the categories of crisis, stability, or self-sufficiency. Over time, our process And hope is to be able to increase focus on prevention and reduce both the frequency and quantity of crisis experiences in our community.
Through our combined efforts, the Human Services Department and agency review funded programs complement the broader system of human services and the many layers required to meet the needs of community. No single ring, as pictured, can be as effective alone. Here, you can see the numerous programs directly operated by the Tempe Human Services Department. For the sake of time, we will not read each of the programs and resources represented by each ring of the system, but it is meant to show the breadth and diversity of the system. Next, you can see a list of the 47 agencies that operated 60 programs that received funding from agency review in the fiscal year 17-18. And here you can see that virtually every city department collaborates and participates in the system of human services. The challenges and needs of our community truly traverse all aspects of life. And finally, in the last ring, we have broadly grouped the community partners who participate in the human services system. This is a broad grouping as there are numerous organizations included in this list. Yet, this does not sufficiently reflect the tremendous role and impact this ring of collaborators plays in bringing about expertise and resources.
Here's a visual representation of how the many layers of the human services system come together to assist someone. It is a client-centered approach built around the specific situation and needs of each individual. In this illustration, resources from every layer of the partnership in the community were required. This is an example based on an actual client experience and highlights the complex nature of human services. Some of the details have been modified for privacy and to provide the narrative in a linear way. It is important to note that people do not necessarily experience the system in this fashion. Instead, they often work through multiple categories of the system simultaneously. This client entered the human services system through the East Valley Regional Veterans Court, in which human services staff participates. At that time, he was in crisis, experiencing homelessness, unemployment, and substance dependence. He was connected to Care 7 and Hope, who were able to provide a food box and personal hygiene items immediately, and then began identifying the services appropriate for this individual's needs. He was then connected to detox services provided by Community Bridges, and subsequently began using iHelp, which is operated by TCAA, for shelter. Both of these programs that have received funding through the agency review process. While receiving treatment for substance dependence, this client was ready for additional assistance. As part of the Veterans Court experience, he was connected to the VA to utilize medical and mental health services. Care 7 and Hope continued to provide case management throughout this client's engagement with the human services system. Hope connected him with the Public Works, and he began utilizing the Tempe Works program for employment. Care 7 helped him through the process of qualifying for transitional housing via the U.S. Vets organization. And finally, this client has addressed many barriers since the initial referral from Veterans Court and continues to utilize the human services system. It is important to understand that this is not a shortcoming. In this case and many others, human services participants will be provided ongoing supportive services to meet their varied and complex needs. We are constantly striving for the best service delivery possible. Through the 2017 Tempe Community Council Community Needs Assessment and the Human Services Department Strategic Plan, we identify gaps in the system and continue to improve services to assist the community. In addition to this effort, Human Services has collectively developed 18 performance measures to support the 5 council priorities. We are using these measures to determine how well programs are working to advance the city's investment in human services and to ensure quality outcomes for the community. A complete list of the 18 performance measures is included in Table 2 of the memo to Council. When approaching this, we are always mindful of the challenges of measuring the qualitative nature of human service outcomes, which are well understood in the industry and academia. Our intent is to develop the highest quality reporting possible while understanding that limiting human experiences to data points will never tell the whole story. The memo to Council includes reporting of over 120,000 service points in fiscal year 17-18. As we move forward, we are working to standardize the way we collect and report data across programs and services appropriately. The intent is to increase the clarity and totality of this data in coming years. And thank you. That would conclude our presentation.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you to your staff, to Nathaniel and Octavia and the whole TCC board. I think as you could see for us as a council, that the Human Services Director and the annual report, they're going to be very helpful for us as we help shape our budget and how we move forward. I think it's really impactful with the new measurements and the benchmarks that you outlined to see what those gaps were. I think that's going to be helpful as well. One thing I think is also interesting is to note that for every dollar invested by the city of Tempe in human services, $2.17 of external funding is secured for every dollar that we put in. That's a big number for us. And you see the numbers. And with that being said, the biggest portion is coming from the federal funds. And that's something that we need to continue to work with Marge on and Mr. Steve Palmer back in Washington, really keep an eye and work with our delegation to make sure that we can continue to secure those federal funds that are vital to the human services need in our city. And I think you see that how important the federal grants are and what the federal portion is. Anyone else have any comments? Yes, Councilmember Adams and Vice Mayor Kuby.
Yes, I too was impressed by the money that was brought in, the 217 for every dollar spent. Also, it makes a lot of sense to combine the reports with the TCC and Human Services, and you guys did a great job doing that and working together in partnership. So that's really good to see. It makes it a lot easier for the residents to understand what we're doing, all the valuable things that we're doing in the community. Also, you served 120,000 people last year. That's a huge amount of people. We don't even have quite 200,000 in the community, so 120,000 was very impressive. I like the homeless outreach program effort where you served 1,558. We had 1,558 contacts, and I was very impressed with that. Also, the hunger relief program served 17,925 people. And then I also had the recent pleasure of observing the AARP Experience Corps program to see the K through 3 children being read to by the 50 and over mentors. And it was just really great to see the kids' smiles on their faces as they read their books to their mentors, and they had great relationships with the mentors. And so hats off to Peggy Goldberg and Rebecca Bond for leading that effort. Thank you.
I just want to point something out that Councilmember Adams mentioned. Our Experience Corps, the Read On program, we are the national model. So
Yes.
AARP comes to Tempe to train individuals across the country for how we do this program. And I know the number has gone up. We have over 87 individuals, volunteers. Has that gone up? About 87 individuals that help participate in the Experience Corps and the Read On program in our elementary schools. And it's made a tremendous impact.
It has.
That's something that should not go unnoted for our staff. And it helps to have a good friend like Peggy, who used to be here, is now with AARP. Kind of helps to have that person in that role for us. So it's really good.
It does. And some of those volunteers have been there 13 years. So that's a long time for volunteers.
Vice Mayor
Thank you for
Kuby
your
and then Councilmember Keating.
So thanks, Nathaniel and Octavia and Naomi for all this information. Thank you to the whole TCC staff and all the volunteers who make this such a dynamic program. It's only human services, citizen-based human service advisory program in the state of Arizona. So that's so impressive. I was so impressed by the information I was reading. I couldn't help but think, how can we get this information out to the public? Because there's not a day that goes by on whether it's social media or running into someone where someone asks me, like, why aren't we doing anything for the homeless, affordable housing? And I just say, but we do. And it would be so helpful to have a communications plan that follows along with this really fine report so we can get the word out to our citizens and information that's digestible and maybe not all at once, but a plan for releasing some of this information and making it easily accessible on our website as well, if the council agrees.
Yeah, I concur. That's something we need. We know if you look at it, I think the number, it's over $18 million or that total that we have for our human services budget that's combined with federal grants and some monies from our general fund. What's important to note is all that money is in the success we're having it's kind of like parks. You're never going to have enough parks and ball fields for people. And there's always going to be a need out there for human services, but making sure that we have a communications plan so that residents know that we are being proactive, we are taking this seriously, and we are a caring and compassionate community. I think you'll see that with the message, as the Vice Mayor mentioned.
I'll just mention too, on April 6th, we're going to have our Human Services Day. And that's where all the providers will be out there for their care fair. And also we'll be talking about human services and the community, so.
Thank you.
It's a good opportunity.
Councilmember Keating, and when, just for our help, when you guys speak, can you try to speak
Oh,
to the
sorry.
microphone, because it's kind of hard to hear you. Councilmember Keating?
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. You know, actually, once again, the Vice Mayor has stolen my thunder. You know, I agree with everything she says, and I was actually going to touch on some of those same points. And I want to thank you for the work you've done on this, and of course, our partners with TCC. You know, it makes so much sense for us to work together and bring something forward together. To have all this here and in one slide deck is certainly very helpful to me, and I assume it would be very helpful to members of the public as well. You know, it really shows me that, you know, Tempe invests a lot in human services. We really kind of, we put our wallet in line with our values, and you know, we often talk about how we spend more per capita than any other city in the region in human services. But that message kind of falls flat to people, I think, who may not see that happen or see the situation get worse in some areas or improve in others. So to have this information here, to have it be available, I think is very, very important. So to piggyback on the Vice Mayor's comment about some sort of communications plan and outreach plan to get this out here to say, you know what, I mean, it's easy to say it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough, but it's hard to say, here's what we're doing, and here's how we're going to improve upon what we are doing. So I think you guys have done a fantastic job. I think the city does a fantastic job, as does TCC, in all this regard. So I can't thank you enough, and this has been very informative. Thank you.
Councilmember Adana Savage?
Thank you, Mayor. You know what, a lot of really great things have been said, and I concur with them all. I think it's really great. And I said the same thing. My first note was, this background material that you've given us that I know people can't see in the public is amazing. I mean, just to really understand, I think the impacts that we're talking about. You talk about 120,000, and I think if I read it right, 83,000 of them were actually in crisis. I mean, think about that a little bit. You know, when we have a population of about 175,000 and 120,000 individuals have been assisted and helped by human services and our partners, I mean, that's pretty remarkable, and I think we're doing a really good job. And so hats off to you, Naomi, and your team. I know you guys all work extremely hard, TCC, TCAA, Community Bridges, all the different groups and organizations. I mean, we definitely say it, and it's cliche, you know, together we're better. But I will tell you, this is a really prime example of where that certainly shows. So I 100% agree. If there's a way that we could come up with some system on there where people could click and maybe go get that background information, I think that would just be really beneficial, because I think when we're out talking to public, it's great to be able to express all the really good things that we're doing, because they just might not know. So I think that would be really wise. The one thing I noticed in regards to the measurements, and it's something to think about in the future, and I know that we're working on, Councilmember Adams and the mayor and myself, when we're talking about our mental health working group, to see where that may fall in when it comes to our performance measures, because I mean, that really is encumbersome of what we're talking about with suicide prevention, homelessness, substance abuse, all of our opioid work. So I know that's going to kind of play a key role as we move forward, and I know you're doing a lot of that work anyway, but I didn't really notice a performance measure for that, so something to definitely put on the future radar. But it's really remarkable things, and keep up the great work.
Vice Mayor Kuby?
So one more thing, when you mentioned Human Services Day coming up on April 6th, great opportunity to get some of the word out to our residents. But it also occurred to me that a date following closely thereupon, April 15th, Tax Day, is the last day that someone can contribute to a charitable organization and have it be a tax credit, $200 per person, $400 for family. So it might be an opportunity to represent all of the agency review charities that can accept those donations, and perhaps do something with communications to get the word out that they can donate for last year's taxes and get the state tax credit. So I'm hoping we can look at that as an opportunity to raise some more funds too for our program. Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you to all the board members at TCC. All right, next item is the introduction of a 5-year capital improvement program and project requests. I know we have Mr. Ken Jones coming forward along with Rosa and Mark.
Good evening. Is this working? Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager. Mark Day and Rosa Chowski have joined me up here. We're going to first introduce the CIP program. As you know, can you all hear okay? Oh, just barely? Okay. So as you know, we have a requirement each year to approve a one-year capital budget and a 5-year CIP program. And the city council has given direction in the past that they like to see this information earlier. So as soon as the departments submit requests to us, we compile that information, and while we're reviewing it and going through it, we're also giving it to you and the public to look at. How's the volume now? Okay? Okay, good. Okay. So Mark's team, Lori and Susanna, put together the CIP, and tonight we're not giving you the recommended CIP. These are only the capital projects that were requested by the departments. We haven't prioritized them. We will come back to you in about a month with that prioritization. So tonight we're going to give you an opportunity, and Mark will lead you through how best to go through that huge document that's in your packet with all of those CIP requests. So that's one of the goals tonight. And again, it's to get this information out in the public early so they can see what we're considering and they can give us feedback early on in the process. So I wanted to bring to your attention one issue that came across this year. Councilmember Granville brought it to our attention, and that is not something that happens often or in the past much, but we had 2 capital projects that were approved by you, 2 that I know of for sure, but approved by you last year in the CIP, and the department chose to withdraw those this year based on updated funding capacities and things like that. So the 2 projects were multi-use paths, and the Public Works Department had withdrawn those after they looked at their transit budget and determined that they really were biting off more than they could chew. Did you?
I think, thank you, Mayor. I think the third one was an expansion of the grid bike program to South Tempe as well. I think that was the third one.
Okay, I think that program still exists, but the funding may have been reduced somewhat. But there may be 3. I may be wrong, and maybe 3. So somehow the microphone seems to have been turned up so I can hear myself now. So that is not something that we want to happen, and we don't expect it to happen in the future. And in the future, when a department requests that a project be pulled, we will keep it on the list, we'll bring it to your attention and let you know that that occurred. So that's, who has the clicker? So we look at our strategic priorities and how this fits into the priorities. And the fact that we're coming forward early at the council's request and giving this information to the city, this really indicates a strong community connection, and that's how we think this fits best. Quickly, I'm going to go over the calendar. If you could flip to that one, Mark.
And that was mine.
Okay, you go ahead.
All right.
Mark will go then through the calendar and the best way to get through that large document.
Okay, so we'd like to briefly review the key public meeting dates and the budget development process for both the capital and operating. So last night we had a public forum at the Tempe History Museum to gather resident input on the upcoming budget. Residents can also participate in the budget process via the online budget forum, and that's at tempe.gov/budgetplan. Tonight, as Ken mentioned, we'll present an overview of all the proposed CIP projects for the 5-year capital program that covers fiscal years 1920 through 23-24. And then a little bit later, we're also going to be presenting the updated long-range forecast. On March 21st, staff will present our initial prioritization of projects for inclusion in the 5-year CIP. And this is another opportunity to provide input on the specific projects for funding. Then on April 25th, we have the city manager's recommended operating and capital budgets will be presented. On May 22nd, we have tentative adoption of both capital and operating, and then June 6th is final adoption of both of those budgets. And then on June 27th is the adoption of the property tax levy. Okay, so I'd like to briefly go over the CIP document that you received that contains all the proposed projects for the 5-year CIP. The department submitted 220 project requests totaling $862 million. In comparison, last year we received requests totaling $873 million, and the final adopted 5-year CIP totaled $649 million. Completing the project request is a collaborative effort involving many departments and stakeholders to ensure that the projects are properly timed, scoped, and address concerns such as ADA compliance, archaeological impacts, and sustainability. We'll be using the document going forward as a reference when we discuss specific CIP projects and for projects recommended for funding. So to help you navigate the document, we provided a table of contents that contains links to the overall CIP program summaries, as well as each of the 12 program summaries in the document. So page 1 contains the overall CIP summary for the entire program. And then page 2 is an overall summary based on all the proposed funding sources. And then next, we've provided you a summary page for each of the major programs that links to a listing of all the proposed projects in that program. For existing projects that will continue into 1920, we have provided the amount of funds being reappropriated and any new funding requests. And then please note that new projects are underlined on that summary page. So a new project means that the project has never been requested before, or it may have been requested previously, but was not included in the adopted CIP. And if you click on the project name, that will take you to the project description, where we provide a narrative on the project purpose and need, priority type, alignment with council priorities, and performance measures, estimated costs and funding sources, anticipated completion schedule, and if there's any operating impacts, what those are listed. And then we provided bookmarks also for each of the projects. So I'm just going to give you a quick example here. So at the table of contents, if you clicked on the water program, it would take you to the water program summary page. And as I mentioned, it will list all the project names, the funding source, any amounts being reappropriated, new requests, and then for the out 4 years, how much is being requested. If you had clicked on the meter replacement program, it would take you to the meter replacement project description page, and then you can, as I mentioned, read through about the project, the time frame, the estimated costs, and operating impacts. So, and then you can just use your bookmarks to go back to the main program listing page. Okay, so the next step in the process will be for staff to begin to prioritize the proposed CIP projects based on funding capacity and the City Council approved scoring criteria. So we use 2 scoring criteria. We have a primary scoring criteria which evaluates projects based on the degree that they contribute to the preservation of city assets, address a public health and safety concern, and accelerate council adopted performance measures. And then we kind of refine it a little bit. We have a secondary set of criteria that we evaluate the projects on, whether they have grant or other leverage or other funding that we can leverage. So for example, maybe we have funding that's available from the Maricopa County Flood Control District. We evaluate the impact of the deferring of the project. So if we deferred it, would it cost us more in the future, for example? The level of public use, whether we have a legal or contractual obligation to complete the project, the operating budget impact of the project, and whether the project was previously approved in the CIP. And so as Ken mentioned, we will return on March 21st with our initial prioritization of CIP projects and request further input on projects recommended for funding.
Before you go, Councilman Navarro, are you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm on the phone, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
So Mayor, if I could just wrap up.
I have one question, Councilmember Erdona Savage.
Well, I was just going to say, we know that there's a lot that goes into the development of the CIP. We have the community input, we have council priorities, we have funding capacities, we have bonding capacities, we have the ability to complete projects, and all of those are going to be taken into consideration. And I know I've talked to a couple council members who, much like our staff, would say, what are we funding for next year? And the answer isn't that simple. We know that we could fund a lot in 1 year, which would reduce the funding in the following year. So for instance, if a dam burst and we needed $30 million, we're going to find $30 million capacity in here, which we know will diminish the capacity in the following year. So there's no magic number that I can tell you that is the number. But we know that when we come back to you in March with the recommendations, we're going to give you a presentation on how we established the capacities that we have for the CIP so that you can see exactly how that works.
Okay. Councilmember Redondo?
So I guess some of this question is for you, Mark, and I'm wondering, is it possible somehow to incorporate the items that have continually been on the CIP budget item list but never been funded? I just feel like there's got to be several items that we, that have been submitted and nothing has ever happened. I think I'd like to know what those are.
We can compile that list for you.
That would be great. Thank you.
And one of the things I want to let everybody know, which I'm sure we're aware of, is last year's request for our CIP was around $872 million and some change. From that, about 74% of that was actually funded based on, because we don't have enough funds to fund everything. So that's where, when Ken's going to come back with the projected budget of what we have already given feedback from the START process tools, from the citizen satisfaction survey, from the employee survey, and from the business community survey. Those are all important instruments and data points that we need to help that they're going to come back to us and give us what we refer to as a red, green, yellow. And in looking at the numbers, I think we're about 10 million less than last year. We're about 861 million versus 872 million. In request for a CIP, that's everything. And about the same percentage, my understanding would be how much of that, about 74% will be funded. Roughly, rough numbers, but then they could change depending upon the direction from council once we get the list of itemized projects that we have in a 5-year CIP. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, what is happening to the employees who used to read our meters? And I know that we're phasing that out as far as the meter readers. I was just wondering what was happening to the employees.
Knowing that thank you, Councilmember, knowing that we were putting into place the automatic meter reading system, we have been reducing that staff through attrition. So as positions become vacant, we haven't been hiring them. Nobody will lose their job. Nobody will be laid off. We might transition people to other positions. But Renee Broderick has been working that angle for quite a while. And we've been aware for quite a while that we would not have as many physical meter readers going out and reading meters in the future. So some of them have been retrained to work in the office because we will have a need in the office to be able to use the computers more to track activity in the meters.
Okay, thank you so much. Also, I was glad to see the water plants that we're putting more money towards the water plants to ensure that our drinking water is safe. Also, there was one thing about a water distribution system going in between McClintock and Rural on Warner Road. And I was wondering, does that mean that area will be repaved after it's done?
Councilmember, they almost always try to coincide any kind of a major sewer work with a repaving of a street. They try to time those projects together. Sometimes we have a break and that can't be done, but for the most part, Public Works tries to time those together.
Okay, that's great. It's just, I've gotten a lot of complaints about the street conditions in the city, both the neighborhoods and the arterial. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at those angles.
Just so we don't have a specific CIP yet.
I know.
This is just information that's being presented to us.
Yes.
In a direction, and they're looking for any questions or feedback in terms of, are we on the right? Now, just because that money's in it doesn't mean all it's going to be funded, but that's another meeting for us to have and information for us to digest as we go through the critical needs that we have.
Exactly. Yep, I get that. Also, just a Clark Park pool that was mentioned, and I'm glad that was in the report also for Clark Park pool.
In regards to Clark Park Pool, so
yes.
that is the result of the council discussions that have taken place that have encouraged staff to submit a CIP request for Clark Park Pool. So that means that pool will compete with other projects for funding in the Parks and Recreation area.
Exactly. Thank you.
Then Councilmember Granville.
So I have a more general question, and one thing that was striking to me, and perhaps I just didn't notice in the past or hasn't been striking, but is the capital budget reappropriations. And I wonder if there's a time series that shows the amount of reappropriations over the years. Is that especially large number? It's hard to know because I don't have a time series in front of me, but it brought to mind, is it just that we don't have the staff to complete these? Were there sort of legal issues with some of the projects that came up? I mean, what is driving that large amount? Because in some cases, it's more than what we're budgeting for in the next fiscal year. So it was very striking, especially in, on public works.
Right, so I'm going to address this in a couple different ways. You've asked a couple different questions. This is a very difficult subject. So what we know is if you don't budget it in the following year and you fail to complete this year, you won't be able to complete it next year because you didn't ask for the budget. So the number that you're looking at is a preliminary number based on current spending at this point in the year. So what they've said is, if this is a big, let's just use $1 million project. I've only spent $500,000. I'm going to reappropriate the whole $500,000 in this document because I don't know how much more I'm going to get done. As we get closer, Mark works with each department to reduce that number. So the actual amount that gets reappropriated is the amount necessary. In some cases, because the budget has to be approved before the fiscal year ends, we actually reappropriate money and then spend it in this year. So then he goes further into next year, and even though you've budgeted and appropriated it, he removes it from their spending ability through electronically. So it's a very difficult concept, but this number represents the worst possible case scenario of needing to carry money forward at this point in the budget process.
But does it identify any areas where we had the money to fund it, but we just didn't have the engineering staff or whatever it is in whatever particular case to get that work completed?
So the second part of your question is also a very good one. And we have been working really hard. Well, when I say we, I mean Marilyn, Shelley, and Julie Hyder have been working really hard to try to get this number down to a better number. We have approved in budgets in the past a lot of money for repairs that can't get done. And we have to do that because we aren't sure which project we're going to be able to get to, so they budget both of them, knowing that we're not going to spend it all, so that they have the capacity to spend it. It sounds like a terrible process, but in order to comply with state law, we have to make sure that we budget everything that possibly could happen, knowing that we're not going to spend it all. We're getting much better at that, and we're recognizing what the limits are, and it's not always staff. To be honest with you, our highest budget that doesn't get spent is in streets. And it isn't because necessarily for staffing. Staffing could be an issue, but a lot of it has to do with the ability to actually do that many street repairs in a year. I know you all get an earful from residents about the number of barricades that are out and the amount of traffic. And that's only completing half of what was budgeted for streets. Imagine if we were doing it all. It would seem like every street in the city was closed. So we're getting better at saying, look, you're not going to be able to do all that. Don't budget that in next year. Let's budget something that can actually get done. And like I said, the public works staff has been working really hard on this, and it has improved tremendously. So to answer your question, yes, there is a lot of carry forward, and there has been more in the past actually that got carried forward just because we over budgeted. But we're aware of it.
Thank you. Great answer. Thank you.
I just respond to Keating now. I don't even worry about it.
Granville?
A couple of things. First off,
because I looked at you and I said it.
I'm glad to see that the rail spur and the phase 2 rail spur and the baseline underpass will get added back in, at least for consideration by council. So I appreciate that. One of the things, years ago, you and I probably had a conversation down here about how it was tough for me. It's one of the few things Lauren and I were talking. We have to print out the whole binder because it's so cumbersome. You want to highlight it and mark it up and tab it. And one of the things that we talked about that you started doing a few years ago was underlining the things that were new, because it was really hard to get a sense, because not everything enters in the 5th year. Some things enter in the 2nd or 3rd year. So I would ask one more addendum to that. One of the things I noticed this year, probably for the first time ever, is that there were a few items that had $8,000 or $10,000 in the CIP from last year, but $350,000, $500,000 this year, because it was a new addition to the number. And so it's not underlined because it's not a new item, but it is a 1,000-fold increase in that item or something like that, right? I think the most extreme one I saw was a $8,000 or $10,000 item that became a $500,000 item. If you could just do a dotted, I don't care how you decide the threshold is or what you want to do, but maybe just a dotted line under it or something, just to say, look, we're making significant increases in what we expected from previous years, because those are the things I'm going to want to look at and maybe ask additional questions about why is streets going up, 500%, or why did this water project suddenly balloon, or whatever the case may be. I think that just makes from a visibility standpoint a little bit easier. The other thing I would say is you've talked about all the different things that are taken into account as part of our system. The council score sheet thing, the start menu that we did, the business survey, the citizen satisfaction survey, as well as the recommendations from the experts that we have in the city. Those are all, and also how it fits into health, safety, wellness, fit, and all that. But the chart we get isn't that sophisticated. The chart we get is really that like XY chart, even though there's probably 4 more dimensions to that chart we don't see. When we get something like parks, or we got our bus stop pullout, organization, there was a really clear scoring system for that, saying we're going to give 15% weight to this factor and 25% weight to this factor. I think for me, it would be helpful to see that back-end data. I assume that back-end data exists. If it doesn't, then I prefer that it existed, because it's sometimes hard to understand how something can score so well when council scores it in our START system, or it scores so well in the citizen satisfaction survey. And yet when you see the CIP request, or you see the budget request, it doesn't seem to have a huge jump in the number. And that's maybe because the department didn't ask for it or something like that. But I think that would be a really helpful thing to see. Because year after year I harp on code enforcement, usually in our top 2 or 3, and it never seems to get the money that I wish it got. I'm not saying I'm right, but I think if I saw the underlying other stuff, that might help me understand it better. The same thing would be equally true for the park tree program, which gets about $100,000 a year. That was number 2 on our list, and so I would want to see why that didn't get more money, why it didn't score higher, that sort of stuff, considering how high it scored for us. If that makes sense.
You, Councilmember,
I have one follow-up, but I'll pause.
You're transitioning into our next presentation. When we get to the long range and the strategic planning, we'll talk a little bit more about the START tool and how that impacts how things get funded, and we'll talk about that a bit. But for the GO bond funded projects, we give you the entire scoring sheet that shows you in the green how they scored, and it gives all of the major and minor criteria, so you can see all of the points as they were allocated. And I remember at least a couple times last year that council members said, I think this one should have scored higher in this category, and we take that into consideration. So we give you that, but it's only for the GO bond funded. If you look at transit projects or water projects that are funded by water cash, it's not going to be in there necessarily, but we'll make sure that we point that out.
And are the different, and it's been now a year since I've looked at it, and are all those different factors, the citizen satisfaction survey, the business satisfaction survey, the START thing, are those the things that show up as part of that scoring system?
So we have the city council approved criteria that we apply, and we get you the citizen information so that you can use that in your...
It's being applied through us.
Yes.
I think my preference would be, and I realize this is maybe a bigger discussion, that scoring system is applied initially sort of, rudimentary, and then we have the ability to adjust it.
We do have an initial scoring based on citizen input, direct citizen input, but much of the citizen input doesn't comment on a specific project. It's, I would like my parks to be greener. And then we have to look and say, what project does that apply to? So it factors in our scoring, but the real way it works is we take that, we compile it, we give it to you so that you can use it in your decision-making process. That's the most effective use of it.
I understand your point. I think I get it. I think I would like it to see it maybe a little bit more mathed out before we started tweaking it.
Okay.
Because I don't know if, I'll speak for myself, I don't know if I'm always a really great conduit for all information. I might have 3 or 4 things that carry more weight with me because of my own bias, and I'd rather see it with my bias removed first. The only other thing I would ask, and I understand that might be part of a larger discussion, but that scoring system seems helpful to me.
So what I would ask council member is this: when we bring the scoring to you, if you could look at the scoring and then recommend a change to that, because I think you're kind of doing that, so that we could get a consensus from the council on what exactly you would like to change, so that I'm not acting on the direction of one council member.
And you shouldn't. I'm
Right.
just trying to plant a seed.
But, yeah, and if you could just more specifically ask your colleagues, I would like to make this change in the scoring so that we can understand whether there's a consensus.
Well, and the reason I mention it is because I don't want to be the one to make up the scoring system. Like what's worth 25%, worth. I'd much rather you all came forward and said, here's roughly what we were thinking, and do you want to change it or edit it? Because if it comes from me, it's not going to go well. I'd much rather it came from you. It's going to go much better. And then the last thing I would add, and then I swear I'm done, is one of the things that always is on our scoring system for all of these projects is sort of health, health, safety, asset management, things like that. I think given the discussions that we've had with Vision Zero, I think there's a certain point where we have to start thinking about the green paint and bike lanes, not as an asset extension, not as an expansion of a system, but as a core thing related to our Vision Zero that would fall under health safety at a base level. And so I think once you recategorize that from a system expansion to a health issue, I think it's going to score a little bit differently. And that would be just my plug for a recategorization of that.
That also is good input, and I think that we have taken that into consideration. We realigned the scoring with the strategic management process that has been implemented to say that now a large part of the scoring is how does this project impact the achievement of that performance measure? And that would score very high. So if
I think it depends on how you categorize it, right? Under which bucket it goes makes a big difference.
Right, but if the transit folks said, we're trying to achieve Vision Zero and our best strategy for next year is painting bike lanes green, then we take that into consideration and say it is a direct relation to achieving a performance measure that the city council has either prioritized or not. So without the tail wagging the dog, when we get to this, the START tool tonight, and we ask you, of all the performance measures that you've scored, here are the results that you've been given, what do you want us to focus on to advance at a faster pace than it's currently being advanced? That's when that conversation could occur, and you could say, yeah, we want to advance Vision Zero faster. Then we'll go back to the department. If they say the next best way to do that is to paint lanes green, then that's what we would say, let's look at a way to fund that. So that, I think it's going to work.
All right, thank you. I appreciate your indulgence.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
I might have forgotten what I was going to say. But a couple things popped up, and first and foremost, I just want to put this out there. I am not a fan of the START tool. I get it, it's a tool and something that we utilize, but I think it's really misconstrued a lot, the way that we score. And maybe there's some way we can work on that in the future so it becomes a little bit more fair throughout the system. But I will say the one thing, when we talked about the code enforcement, for example, and I know in the START tool, we're going to talk about that in our next item. And the one reason why I don't think I scored it high is because we were actually making solid improvements in that area. And I think it's so important to be able to make sure that that's transparent and we are taking that into consideration. Because just because we're not where we want to be doesn't mean that we haven't making great strides to get to where we want to be. So as long as we can see that in this methodology as we move forward, to me, that's really key. Because all these little things are just little cogs in something bigger. And the impact that they make, to me, is what I'm going to be looking for. So I don't want to beat up the START tool. I'll beat it up in the next item, but just want to throw that out there.
Councilmember Adams, then Vice Mayor Kuby.
Yes, two other points I wanted to make. The transportation right-of-way in that section, you proposed 30 different proposals, and only 3 were located in South Tempe. And I just want to make sure that we're looking at all the proposals and making sure it's fair to everyone in the city. And also solid waste, the commercial section has been losing money for many, many years now. And I'm just wondering if we need to look at diversifying that area.
Mr. Mayor, is that?
Vice Mayor Kuby.
Before I get to what I was going to say, to that point about solid waste, there's global challenges that are impacting the solid waste picture, notably China and its rejection, and Asia, its rejection of a lot of recyclable products. So, I mean, it's complicated, maybe not too much to go into this time, but we could hear an update at some point from solid waste about the challenges that they're facing in that regard.
I recognize that, but I'm just only speaking to the commercial section, not the recycling section. It's three different sections in solid waste.
Okay, well said. So I wanted to just bring up a couple things. I know we're not going to talk about specific things that we're interested in funding, but under the transit program, I noticed of all the categories, of all the projects, CIP projects, there's just one that's classified as a study. And I know that with Prop 400, the extension coming up in, was it 2022, that there's going to be needed to be some studies, and I don't know if it doesn't seem like fiscal year 1920 is too soon to do that, but we did do the small area transportation study with ASU, and I wonder if there are any studies there in the background that should be brought to the fore, because we know we're challenged with our traffic, and the Novus project is putting considerable stress on our systems, and I wonder if there's opportunity, maybe not through CIP, maybe it's through in-kind contribution from ASU, but are there other studies that are in the pipeline that will be brought up in this CIP? I mean, obviously not from this one, but is that a consideration?
Well, I don't know the answer to that exactly, but I know our transportation folks are listening, and they will take that into account. We will get back to you on that. Because I think what you're saying is, if we don't have the studies in hand when they go to fund Prop 500, then we won't be able to get our foot in the door, and maybe there should be more studies funded in the CIP. It could be that they're doing that in an operating budget, but we'll check.
Bus rapid transit, anyone? Just saying. And the other thing is with the capital improvements program, the general governmental program projects, I noticed we have capital improvements for electric vehicle charging station. And it brings up this idea about CIP improvements when you invest in a certain, our fleet, we purchase our fleet vehicles, is that a CIP?
Yes. Yep.
So if we can show, or if a department could show that a purchase of electric vehicles, for example, shows savings for that department, is there a way to create revolving funds in that department where that department could take those savings and put them back into purchasing more of that good? I think with we don't really have a performance measure yet for our electric charging, our electrifying our fleets. Through the Climate Action Plan, we're probably going to see a performance measure. It may come too late for this budget cycle, but I'm just bringing up the idea about whether there's a possibility to look at that. It's a complexity, I realize, but in the case of electrifying our fleet, we're showing savings, and why not take those savings and reward that department for saving money and give them more money to do what they're doing?
No, I appreciate that input. I have to think about that, because the reality is, if a department saves money, we like to come back to you and say, where would you like to spend that dollar? And that's what we think is the best direction for how to spend money. So we appreciate the fact that we can save money, maybe through electric vehicles or other means, or other innovative means. But I don't know that departments don't need to be rewarded with more money to spend on things. I mean, if
maybe I phrased it badly.
Okay.
But think about Microsoft. They have a fund, and they have sustainability projects in their company, and they fund those projects, and with the savings from those projects, because the best sustainability projects are ones that save money, right? So they get to put more money into projects, and they create this whole fund, a revolving fund that gets to spark more sustainability projects throughout the company. And it's a source of innovation and money saving and kind of motivation for staff to see the direct results of the innovations and money they're saving. And maybe it's not the discussion for tonight, but I think there's some element of that could be considered when we consider our CIP.
Okay.
So I think we look forward to you coming back and giving your proposed budget, obviously with our input from not only the community survey priorities from our residents that we do every year, as well as employees, and some of the tools that we use from the start, even though that's a whole nother conversation on the next item. We look forward to getting that information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're all going to stay up here for the next item.
Yep, you guys are staying here, right? So the next item is our long-range financial forecast update and strategy tool for aligning resources.
So, Mayor and Council, we every year we give you a long-range forecast, and we gave that to you in detail in November, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail tonight. We're going to focus mostly on what's changed since November. This is what establishes the resources that are available for us to plan and to budget. So we're going to focus mostly on what has changed since November and update those for you. You can go to the next slide. Go ahead. So obviously this issue focuses mostly on our financial stability, both in our bond ratings and our fund balances. And I just want to briefly touch on the assumptions. You have a detailed assumptions page in your packet that tells you everything that we've assumed in almost all of the categories where we're making forecast predictions. But I want to update you. You can put them all up there, Mark. I'm not going to address each one of them. But let me just give you a general sense that the economy is beginning to slow. We're starting to see signs that the economy is not growing at the rate it was, both nationally and locally. That doesn't mean we're not going to have growth. It just means it's not at the rate that we've seen. And we've seen these mostly in the numbers we've gotten since November. A lot of these economic data are showing a bit of a slowing. So without getting too detailed about what we may or may not have to spend, I'll say that we have had a pretty good run in the general fund of expanding it. We've added positions, we've added services and programs, and we need to be careful in the next budget that we're funding the most critical things to you all, to the public who voices their opinions through you, so that we're focusing our efforts on those things that are priorities to you, those things that are the most critical to you, because we are not going to be able to expand the general fund this year like we did last year. We've done a lot of good things, which we should. When we're bringing in money from taxpayers, we should be spending it on programs and services for taxpayers. But I'm telling you that growth isn't as robust as it was in the past. So when we get to the START tool, be cognizant of the fact that we are going to need you to prioritize some things. There isn't going to be enough money to do everything you want to do, and for the departments just to maintain the levels of service that they have currently. The departments are going to need to expand their budget some just to maintain those levels of service. So that's my cautionary tale. Where I'm not going to go through all these assumptions. Mark, what's on the next page? These are some of the things that we were bringing to your attention that have changed recently. We've decreased what we think the growth related to development is. We've increased it since 17-18. It's stabilizing a bit. Retail sales tax and bed tax, we had projected a little bit larger growth. We're reducing that a bit in this forecast, not significantly, $6 million over 5 years, so a little more than $1 million a year. We got some good news. Employee health care costs actually went up less than we thought it would over the 5-year period, so we've improved that forecast a bit. And then just looking at the general fund, not in detail, I've said most of this, where we have some capacity, but you're going to have to prioritize, and we still project a strong fund balance. We've put some things up here that you already know, we've talked about since February, and then go ahead, Mark. We always go to this model just to show you we're not making proposals now, but I wanted to show you the model that still shows some growth in both the recurring and non-recurring general fund, and it can still show some growth in positions, very few, that still stabilizes the fund. Now, we know that you could pile a bunch of that into next year, and the future years might be more lean. We aren't projecting an economic downturn in this forecast. We are projecting to spend our fund balance down in 5 years to get to the 20 to 25% in year 5 that is our policy. So that's about all. It's a summary of where we were since February. And then Mark's just going to quickly go through the other funds other than the general fund.
Okay, so I'll briefly review the city's other major operating funds. Since the last forecast in November, there haven't been any substantial changes to the funds. For water, wastewater, it's stable with no increases planned for 2019. Staff is beginning to update their comprehensive rate study model to determine the timing of future rate increases with a drawdown of fund balance in a sustainable manner. Solid waste proposed rate adjustments are assumed in the forecast, but the fund is still forecasted to suffer deficit spending due primarily to the commercial operations. Staff continues its efforts on commercial customer retention and operational efficiencies. For the golf fund, green fees are projected to grow at a slower pace than we had anticipated. Future green fee increases will probably be needed, and staff is focused on operational efficiencies. Future large golf CIP projects will compete with other GO bond-funded projects as part of this year's CIP process. And then for our emergency medical transportation or ambulance fund, they just recently completed their first full year of operations with continued expansion of the service projected in the future. And then transit, the fund is stable with a measured spend down of fund balance and a focus on maintaining their existing assets. Revenues are slightly less than the November forecast, and streetcar operations have also been built into that forecast. HERF revenues, the HERF fund, HERF revenues are slightly less than November. And as you know, the amount that we receive is always subject to any legislation. The forecast assumes a transfer from the general fund to fund street projects, but the actual amount that we're going to transfer will be based on the direction that you give us, as well as the transportation department's ability to complete the projects. And then performing arts, with passage of the arts and cultural tax, the previous future deficits have now been eliminated. Over the next several months, community services will work on developing plans on specific arts and cultural services funded when the new tax takes effect in January 2021.
So we're going to transition right to the start and prioritization of performance measures. So I'm going to address a couple of the comments that Councilmember Arredondo Savage made, because I still think there's value here if we recognize what we think the START tool was put into place for. The START tool was not for us to get council priorities and give back to you some calculation of what your priorities are. We don't want to do that. First of all, it would be a violation of open meeting law. Secondly, it isn't what we intended to do anyway. What we intended to do was avoid you talking about 99 different performance measures in detail in a 15-hour meeting. So what we asked you for was just give us your input. We summarize that input and give it back to you. And what we're hoping is this initiates conversations like the one that Councilmember Arredondo Savage started here a second ago about whether we think those results are what we want to do or what we don't want to do. So what we want you to focus on, Rosa's going to go through some details here, but what we want you to focus on is this. And if there's a flaw in the tool, it's probably that we're not providing enough direction on what we expect the feedback to be. We don't want you to tell us what you think is important in the city. Everybody thinks fire response times are important. What we want to ask you is, how are we doing in achieving the goals that you've established for each of those? And do you want us to accelerate our achievement of those goals? So the information that we give you, you can interpret that. And I think there should be meaningful conversations that go on that say, look, colleagues, I think some of you rank this high because you think it's important. But after Rosa gives her presentation on how quickly we expect to achieve our ultimate goal on that, maybe we don't need to accelerate it. If this tool starts that conversation that it has achieved what we would like, which is for you to focus on those things so that we can go back and develop budget strategies to more aggressively attack those things that you think are important. So Rosa's going to go through the ones that rose to the top of the tool, but you can talk about any one of them or all of them tonight. Rosa?
Good evening, yes. Thank you, Ken. So one of the most important functions of a strategic plan for any government is using the information that we receive from our city operations and sharing that information with the city leaders, the people who make the decisions that impact the people they serve. And that's what we're here to do. So yes, as Ken has shared, the START tool, the Robin Arredondo favorite tool, is...
Well, now we know.
Is basically a tool to help us start the conversation, hence the term START. We want to make sure we have a conversation with you and share with you what those in the audience, our colleagues at the city, have been working on. So the 14 performance measures that were identified in the START tool that you took in November are really identified, and how that rose to the top out of the 99 is basically it was scored at least 1 point by each council member and received at least 50% of points from the total. So the acceleration direction today, the request is for you all to have a conversation and to share with us what you would like our office, along with budget, to bring back in April, as far as in working with city departments, of what it would look like if we were able to accelerate those few things. So getting started, the first one that was identified as the highest priority was the housing ratio. The performance measure, just to remind everyone, is achieve a council-adopted housing inventory ratio for affordable workforce market rate housing categories by 2040. This is probably one of the most difficult performance measures of the 99 next to homelessness. And I have to applaud Human Services for working very hard with our office on trying to come up with a performance measure. In the last few weeks, they were able to receive the housing inventory from the consultant, which is the slides I would like to share with you and explain why the baseline and the target is directly aligned. Housing stock as percentage rate for affordable is 49.3, and it is identified as not a spelling error. Its target is 49.3. That means the housing stock for Tempe affordable is almost 50%. Next slide.
Wait, can we go back? There's a couple things. One is about the affordable housing impact statement, which I know I won't go on about this, you guys. I do love the AHIS, but a concern being at what stage. I mean, I know we say fully implement it. If we're just implementing at the building permit stage, it may be too late because it's supposed to be a tool that council can use to assess progress. So I just want to plant that. And Mr. Mayor, did you have something you were going to say?
No, the only thing that on this issue, although it looks like we are hitting, our target, but there's a lot of stuff that's coming online that's going to, within the next year, is going to have this not where we are today.
Right.
So that's something that we just need to be prepared for in the future.
Right to plan.
Councilman Granville?
Yeah, I sent you an email about this, and I candidly probably got that email to you a day or two too late. But can you explain how the 49.3 is both the baseline and the target? I mean, because the baseline is, well, we did a survey and we figured out where we are. The target is typically, we looked at industry standards, we looked at best practices, we looked at whatever, and it would seem odd that 49.3 would be the number that came up just sort of by happenstance.
So if I can go to the next two slides, which is the workforce housing. Also matches, correct. So the housing stock baseline for workforce is 34.2, and our target is 34.2. And the next slide gives us the market rate, which is 16.5, and the target 16.5. So working with the consultants, they recommend, we understand that this is a blend of a ratio. They recommend that basically Tempe is doing pretty well regarding those ratios. They know that a trend nationally is what we're seeing is that cities are eroding affordable housing. The hard part for us, and it's going to be the strategies, the heavy lifting and working with community development, human services, and a lot of different departments, is how do we maintain that in the coming years? I think that was the point that was just made. So the strategies, and actually I would like to share that we also have solicited the help from Bloomberg Foundation through What Works Cities. And they will be working, who also agreed that this is a nice blend of ratio for affordable workforce and market. But once again, that we should start working with, say, partners like ASU, because we have some unique challenges in Tempe, college towns. Obviously, we're landlocked. So those are the type of things that I think we have the right people at the table. We're able to identify some strategies to your point.
Right, so that's a follow-up question. So what you're telling me, and apparently I didn't misread the email that I got from you, is that our goal is to maintain where we are because there will be pressures that will be pushing us away from where we are. So okay, which is fine, but that also means that what you're saying is that right now it's fine. And I think the thing that we often hear from constituents is that right now it is not fine. So I'm not sure.
If I could.
I'm not saying that they're right. I'm saying that we hear it. I personally think they're right. But so could we get this same information for other cities? I know we've seen it once or twice before, and we tend to run middle of the pack, as I recall. But
Yes.
And I'd also be curious to know what the process would be if we as a council simply decided, like, look, we want to do better than where we are.
Right. And that is the conversation that Naomi and her team are coming back on April 6th to discuss with you. I think they are conducting some community forums. They have the information from the consultant. We will be working a little bit more with Bloomberg. So on April 6th, they will give you.
So then potentially at that date, we'll have the ability to adjust this based on feedback.
Absolutely.
Okay, that helps me out. Thank you.
Right, Councilmember Adams?
So, Ms. Inchausti, you're saying that 83% of our housing is affordable and/or workforce housing. Is that correct in the city?
Yes,
When you combine
49.3.
those two?
Yes.
And that is that considered a best practice, or what I'm hearing you say is the consultants are saying that that's a good number for us?
Yes, the consultants, BBC, I believe is the consultants, and then Bloomberg Foundation. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So number 2 on the START tool was tree and shade canopy, which is a performance goal of achieving a citywide 25% tree and shade canopy by 2040. And if I can direct you, the baseline is 13, which is the gray area, which that data was collected in 2017, establishing that baseline, and then the target is 25. We have had a GIS intern working with Craig's team to identify. There's a lot of things that have been heavy lifting with this. One is how do we inventory one of our greatest assets, which is our trees. And so we had an intern working with Craig's team. I know that he is looking to try to find some additional funding. And how do we then collect all that data, the software system of how do we use and access that information. So I just wanted to share with you. I also think there was a question from one of the council members regarding, are we taking tree donations? And yes, we are taking tree donations. Braden Kay has been working with Dave McClure on that program also. So I think that was one of the questions.
And Rosa, isn't also one of the key strategies of the hiring of the urban forester, the arborist? And that was supposed to be last fiscal year, and this year it's going to happen though, for sure, right?
Yes, my understanding is the job description is ready to go, or the job bulletin, and it should be out in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Councilman Granville?
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that would be helpful for me with this particular goal is, so we saw the CIP request for roughly $100,000 a year, but that number doesn't really mean anything right now because I don't know how many trees that buys. And I also don't know how many trees we need. So I looked back at a video of me speaking. I'm not a great source of facts, but of my back of the...
Wait, that's recorded.
Yeah, no worries. And I have a fiance who tells me that every week. Ken's smiling because he's probably got the same wife who tells him the same thing every week. Going back that time, I thought we were about 17,000 trees short, which was about $4.2 million, which worked out to like $200 and something thousand a year. And the number that I was given at the time was $250 a tree. I don't know if all those numbers are still true. To plan it, and then it was like $60 a year matter of fact, I would guess those numbers aren't true anymore. But what I would like to know is, look, if we're gonna get from 13 to 25%, this is how many trees we need to plant every year, and this is how many dollars we need to allocate. Let's say the number is 850 trees a year. At $100 a tree, at 850, our budget to get here should be this dollar amount every single year. Because right now, a $100,000 number in the CIP means nothing to me except as a moral statement, but not as a statement of if it puts us on, above, or behind pace.
Mayor, if I could comment on
Yes,
that.
Ken.
So, Councilmember, we're not going to ask you to tell us how much more to budget for this. We're not asking you for a dollar amount. What we're asking you for, if you look at the chart, is we intend to reach that target by 2040.
Yeah.
We will do what we will plan as necessary to achieve that goal by 2040, unless you tell us tonight we would like you to accelerate that goal and get there sooner than your plans currently call for. So
Okay.
in each of these slides that you see, and let me just say, this isn't perfected yet. We're developing as we go here. Some of these are rough estimates. But when we've asked the department When do you expect to achieve that goal based on the strategies you currently have in place? Not necessarily based on the money you have in this year's budget, but based on your strategies, when do you expect to achieve that goal? That's the date we're targeting. If you want us to target an earlier date, then we want you to tell us that.
So then the thing I would, thank you, Mayor. I apologize. The thing I would say then is for this goal, I would ask us to accelerate this for 2 reasons. Number one, because it's going to get hotter sooner, as Vice Mayor Kuby reminds us all the time. But 2, it's not a tree planting goal, it's a tree canopy goal. So the canopy of the trees we plant now will provide much greater benefit than the canopy of the tree we plant in 2040. So it would make logical sense to me to front load something because it's one of the few assets that goes up rather than down over time in value.
So Mayor, if you want to hold those conversations until after Rosa gets through this, then maybe you can compare all of them, because it's easy to say, I want to advance this one, and then you get to the next one and say, that one's also important, and then you get to the, so if we could.
I won't say that about any others.
However you want to have that conversation is fine, but at some point, we would like you to tell us what the consensus is.
Before we get there, to that point, everything that is coming forward to us as a council is obviously very important to us. We've rated it, we've studied it, we've heard from residents. It's all worthy. That being said, if you accelerate one target, another target is going to have to be, not accelerate. It's going to have to be, it's going to have to go push back, which means we only have X amount of dollars to do certain things. So that's why we're using this, and we'll come forward with the red, green, and yellow for the CIP projects and that we have moving forward. That's why when we say, instead of doing one-offs, just like we're doing, like what you mentioned, not saying it's not important, but as a council, we need to have that discussion in the broader text of, here's all the items that we want, here's how much money we have, based on all the tools and the data we have, this is what we can use to give direction to staff to help come for the next 5-year CIP, knowing that if you move something up, something else is going to be moved back. So, and we already are seeing a slowing in the economy and some other things that it's going to continue to see, and some of the other revenues. We have some challenges. We also have a lot of money that's in deferred maintenance in our CIP for our facilities that we have been given previously to this meeting. So that's everything we're trying to in a nutshell, come back to us. This is just a tool. Here's where our target is. But just keep in mind, if you move something up, something either have to be pushed back. It's not like, let's do it now. That's why it's important that we have everything together at once. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
This is why I do not like this tool, because it's really misleading in the sense, if you look at the numbers, there's actually 2 council members that didn't even rank this particular item. I gave it a 0. So, I mean, I just get super frustrated that we are spending all this time talking about these particular, top 10 items that honestly, I know exactly how I ranked it and what I did based on the performance measures and where we are and where I thought we could be based on acceleration. So, I mean, I look at this and say, to me, this is just a piece of the bigger picture. So when we talk about accelerating things, it shouldn't be just from the START tool. It needs to be all those different tools. So when we sit here and spend this much time on one particular item, I mean, I will tell you, first and foremost, I will put roads way above tree and shade canopy in the sense of that's something our citizens want. It's something that the business survey said. I mean, it's what we're hearing out in the public. So I just don't want to get so caught up in spending a lot of time on each individual item, because when you put all the pieces together, I think the discussion is going to change. That's all I'd say, Mayor.
All right. Rosa.
Okay. Property code enforcement, it is achieved 85% on the code compliance composite score. And just to remind council, the composite score is a compilation of the community survey, the business survey, and an audit of our commercial and residential areas annually. So as you can see, our baseline is 62.1, our target is 85, and we are trending up. The green box around the 65.40% of the current shows that it's trending up. Pavement quality. Achieve adopted standards of pavement quality index equal to a citywide average rating of 70 or higher. So we can see the baseline is 59. We have remained at 59 since 2016. Target is 70, and the box is obviously in the red or the orange because we haven't been trending up. I just wanted to share with the council just points of data that has been identified in both the community and the business survey as important to our community. And the last 3 years, we have remained at 59, not because our team is not working very hard. It's just they're trying to maintain the streets of what we have. Basically, the highest number we've ever achieved has been 60, and that was in 2013.
Councilmember Keating, then Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say really quickly, me and Councilmember Arredondo Savage had a town hall on Tuesday, and this was the topic of the night. It was fix our roads. So throwing that out there.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I've had the same. As with when I've been out in the public, as far as the streets, neighborhoods are very upset about the street conditions, and I think that 59 PQI for the last 3 years, not going up in that category is really unacceptable when that's one of the top priorities that the residents want. So that would be an area that I would say we should accelerate our efforts.
And keep in mind, I don't think anybody disagrees with this because I hear when I'm out talking to residents, same thing. We also have a decrease in HERF funding too. That helps contribute to this. And like goes back to the earlier point, we have X amount of dollars. We have a lot of priorities that we come in place. That's why we have our strategic plan. I'm not saying one's more important than the other, but this is the part. This is why we're having this conversation. So when it comes back at our next CIP with all the different CIP projects, they'll give us a better idea of where we can move and use this data information. That's what it's for. Is help us use this to make our decisions and help set policy for the upcoming budget.
Exactly, and that's where the surveys point to improved streets. So it goes with what you're saying there.
Vice Mayor?
But also, I mean, I want to point out that the STARTS tool does identify the pavement quality index as very important. It's number 4. So, I mean, that reaffirms your position there. So it's not as if that's not found in the data as well as in anecdotal data.
No, it's important.
It's important.
Ms. Inchausti?
Start number 5 is feeling of safety in parks, and there's going to be 3 slides because we measure this in different ways. Neighborhood parks, which shows during the day neighborhood parks, the baseline was 74. We want to achieve 88%, and that is actually our measurement is very satisfied or satisfied with the feeling of safety in parks greater than or equal to the top 10% of the national average. This is one of those performance measures that we were exceeding the national average, and we're pushing ourselves. We want to exceed, we want to be world-class, and that means we're going to push ourselves beyond just reaching the target that we had of national average. But as you can see, we have some room for growth. Our neighborhood parks, we're not meeting the target, and our neighborhood parks during the night, our baseline is 43. We want to get to 88, and we're currently at 42.20. The next slide shows us how our residents are feeling about city parks. And these city parks are also called regional parks, but they're Kiwanis and Tempe Beach. And our baseline is 81. We want to get to 88, and we are currently during the day at city parks feeling about 74.30% satisfaction. And then city parks during the evening, it's 51.9 is the baseline. That's gone down a little bit, and our target is still 88%.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, Rosa, have you noticed the trend as far as going up since we've had the armed guards in the parks, or have we not calculated that into this equation?
Well, that would be probably the survey results for this coming year will probably tell us the results of this.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to, the next slide, I can share that. In desert parks, we have 69.4% for desert parks during the day, and 88% is the target. We're at 66.60. Desert parks during the evening, 36% is a baseline, 88% is a target, and we're at 35. I just also wanted to clarify that desert parks are Papago, Hayden Butte, Evelyn Hallman, and also a point of interest of data, which is this basically why we collect all this trend data. The largest decline has been in neighborhood parks during the day. So it has been a 12.3% decline since 2016. Next slide. Ending homelessness. This is going to be one of those measures, as you know, it is an aspirational goal of getting to zero. Achieve an end to homelessness in Tempe as measured by Tempe's annual count. So as you can see, our annual count for 2018 was 1,117. The next slide we'll share. So one of the things that we heard from council.
Vice Mayor?
Sorry, about the homelessness thing, I was just looking at the START tool. Maybe it is trash, because no, I noticed that there's 3 identified zeros on the homelessness issue. More actually, more lack of support than on the tree and shade canopy. So, but there's obviously been community identified concern about homelessness, right?
In the START tool? I'm sorry.
Right, now the START tool, there's 3 that identify, as homelessness being, 0 point assignments. But obviously there's data out there that shows the community is concerned about it, but it still remains an important
In the START
item,
tool
right?
is number 6, identified as priority.
Right. I was just kind of referring, I'm still stuck on maybe Robin's analysis talking about tree and shade, that there are 2 council members that had 0, so why is it so important? But in this case, there's 3 that had 0, but we still all would agree that homelessness is an important issue.
So if I could, again, my Vice Mayor, the community, we don't ask them, we ask them a different question.
Right.
We ask them, is it important? They say yes or no.
Right.
We're asking you, is what we're doing sufficient, or do you want us to advance our, there are 2 different questions. The START tool is not asking whether you think homelessness is important. It's asking, are our current efforts sufficient, or do you want us to advance them? So I just hate to compare the community survey to the START tool, because it's 2 different questions.
But one council member scored at 15. If that's, there's zeros on there, but then it was offset by
Right,
another
no, I
council
understand.
member.
Yeah, that's another concern.
We do use a version of the START tool.
Wasn't being a Shapira there, okay. We're going to talk about this as a Shapira.
We do an online budget forum that is similar to the START tool, and we could compare those results.
Councilmember Keating?
Thank you, Mayor Holman. No.
Got it. You got it.
Shots
You started
fired.
it.
Shots
Yeah.
fired. All right, now I'm going to talk about, I got to talk about the START tool now too, that we're having this thing going on, okay? I think the issue with the START tool is, if I put 100 points into one thing and the rest of the council put 0 into it, that'd be number 1 that we're talking about.
It doesn't make it.
How does it not make it?
It ranks in 2 ways. The top 14 got at least 1 vote from a majority of the council members. So at least 4 people scored it some score.
Okay.
And the total points, the total 14 are 50% of the total points allocated. So we're doing it based on the number of people who think it's important and the importance overall.
I see.
Just to prevent a Shapira.
That is, okay, all right. So that was my issue with the START tool, and I would suggest, now that you've explained that, that makes more sense. But I would suggest in the future maybe limiting the total number of points we could put in any one category, whether that's 5 or 10 or whatever. So I don't put 25 into homelessness, even though that's really important. Or I don't put 25 into naming a park after Randy Keating, and to make it seem like, yeah, see, me and Robin both got 25 in it, and all of a sudden now it's the number 1 thing. And I think that we could do it a little bit of a better way. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Ms. Inchausti.
Thank you. With the homeless measure, as I mentioned, I know it's an aspirational, so we thought we would create interval measures that helps the public and helps us understand, are we really moving the needle? So the next slide shows unduplicated Tempeans served by basically, I'm sorry, 483 are out of the 1,117 are the homeless that are new to the count. So basically, we're looking at the baseline of 483, and our target is 434. And you might ask yourself, why 434? Human Services is working on incremental decretion, so 10% a decrease by the year 2022. The next slide is another measurable strategy, number of people diverted from homeless, and these are the people who are in crisis. So these are the folks who have not fully implemented themselves or gone into the homeless services navigation, but they are identified in crisis. So they receive funding through the homeless grants that Human Services has, and our baseline was basically 27. Our target is 36. The average number of days is another measurable strategy. Human Services is really working on trying to get individuals who are experiencing homelessness housed as quickly as possible. So the baseline was 41, and the target was 36. So we're not reaching that, but as you can see, it's measurable. The next is a number of people permanently housed, and this is actually HUD programming rapid housing funding, and that was identified as 239. We knew that based on the funding that we did receive that we would be able to house, permanently house 239. They met that goal. Next is the retention rate for housing, which is very important, and this makes sure that we're not just housing folks and they're falling out of housing and going back into the system. As you can see, their baseline was 89, and the target is 85, so they exceeded that target. So quality of pre-K enrollment, there's been conversations with the council, so this we know that is already been identified for budget, but I also wanted to share that basically the performance goal is 45% of 33 and 4-year-olds children enrolled in quality early learning, and the baseline is 38 and the target is 45. So community services, quality of community services, and this, you will see 4 slides that identifies 4 separate, basically divisions or services of community services and Keith Burke provides to our community. First is quality of before and after school programs, which is Kid Zone, and our baseline is 73.2, and our target is 90%. And I just want to say that basically these are the quality of community services programs is measured in our community survey, and we were exceeding that national average. So once again, our measurement is achieve ratings of very satisfied or satisfied with the quality of community services programs greater than or equal to the top 10% of the national benchmark cities as measured in our community survey. Once again, these are departments who are challenging themselves and knowing we could stay at the highest national average, or we can push ourselves and try to be the top 10%. So in looking at Kid Zone, we see that it's not trending up, but this has recently changed to the top 10%. Next side is the quality of city recreation programs and services. The baseline is 76.9, the target is 90%, and we are currently at 74%, and that is trending up. Quality of city programs, library programs and services, baseline was 85%, identified in 2014, the target is 90%, and we are currently at 83.50. And lastly, quality of Tempe City Center for the Arts programs. Baseline is 79%, which is identified in 2014 survey. Target is 90%, and we are currently at 73.70. Number 9 in the START tool is the unemployment rate, and that is baseline was identified as 3.1, and the target is actually 3.1, and that you will see it at the end that they're asking to change from college towns as a benchmark to GPEC. It's just an easier data point that we would have, but we're meeting that target. Number 10 in the START tool, feeling of safety in the city. This performance measure is achieve ratings of very satisfied or satisfied with the feeling of safety in the city greater than or equal to the top 10%, once again, of the national average. The baseline is 75.3. Our target is 94, and we're currently at 68%. Once again, that one is identified in both the community and not officially in the business survey, but one of the questions in the business survey is about retention or why they stay in the city of Tempe, and public safety tends to be one of the highest importance for businesses. I wanted to share this with you and thank Brooks from the police department, actually. One of the council members I know mentioned, how do we use the employee or the community survey? And these are the type of data points in the geocoding that's being used to make decisions. Thanks to Brooks, she identified this is actually through our Tempe Accelerates, they're cross-tabbing the filling of safety questions with other questions in the community survey, such as do they rent or own, or their gender, or do they identify as non-conforming or prefer not to answer, to see if there's any correlation in the type of individuals who do not feel safe in our town. Also, on the right is an example of the character areas by how people are feeling safe in our city. So as you can see, in character area 8 is Corona South Tempe character area. They feel the safest, and obviously up 52.99 character area 3, which is downtown Rio Salado, would identify as the greatest opportunity for increase. So start number 11, carbon neutrality. Achieve the city council city goal of carbon neutrality in municipal operations by 2050 with a strategy of 100% renewable energy by 2035. And you can see the baseline is 40,670 metric tons identified in 2015 with the target of 0 estimated at 2050. Number 12, in the START tool, achieve rates of 0 for alcohol and marijuana use by 10th and 12th grade students in Tempe as measured by the biannual Arizona Youth Survey. This, if I can call attention, the baseline is obviously on the right. Alcohol, the teens identified alcohol past use and past 30-day use. Baseline was 24.3 identified in 2016, and the target is 0. That is trending down. And then marijuana in the past 30 days, the teens identified the baseline was 16.1, and to get to 0, the current is 21.80.
Vice Mayor?
Can you go back to that slide? So youth alcohol and marijuana use, did the coalition, they chose those two categories. They didn't include cigarettes or e-cigarettes?
No, they have not.
Mm-hmm. Is there an opportunity to ask that in the future for future?
We can pass that along.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the board member can tell us.
You know, vaping is definitely one of the things that they're talking about, for sure, and I know the school district is really addressing vaping, especially Tempe Union High School District. But right now, I think they're really working to incorporate opioids and what we're doing with them, and so I think they're trying to get their arms around that, and then hopefully they'll be able to bring on vaping. So it's definitely on their radar.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
13, city website quality satisfaction, and achieve ratings of very satisfied or satisfied with the quality of city website greater than or equal to the top 10% of national benchmark cities. The baseline is 68.4, target is 71%, and we are currently at 61.90, and this is one of those that I can share with you. It's quality, the usefulness of a city website, and that is changing in the verbiage. And then the last START tool item is facilities condition index. Achieve an average facility condition index less than or equal to the national benchmark standards. The target is to be 10% or less, and the baseline is 14.83. And just for the audience or for those watching, an FCI is the ratio of assets repair needs to the value of the entire building. And I've got to say, Charlie Bladine has done a great job trying to take an inventory of all our facilities. And what this means to our public is we have 120 city buildings, and we are taking an inventory of basically how are they doing. And 40% has been inventoried, and he continues to do that type of work and get us information.
Just a comment on the
Councilmember
facilities. Comment on the facilities master plan. Keep in mind that if we do not spend the money and fix these buildings, it takes 3 times as much money in the long run. So we need to really make sure that we prioritize the fixing of our buildings so they're safe for our residents to attend. And it's not more costly in the long run.
And then, as typically we give an update, there are no new performance measures, but I wanted to just briefly share with you the revised on some of these youth and alcohol and drug usage. They had asked, they are now working with our opioid working group. So they have asked to include drug misuse, marijuana, The usefulness of the city website is really to clarify the language from quality to usefulness instead of quality to usefulness. The ADA transition plan, that is a huge undertaking for our city. And one of the things we realized is we needed to include facilities in that language. We're taking an inventory of those. The housing ratio I shared with you, which is the proposal is to achieve the council adopted housing inventory ratio for affordable workforce and market rate housing categories by 2040. That is a new language, and it's changing to achieve a housing inventory ratio for affordable workforce and market rate housing categories that meets recommendations made for a 3-person household in the most recent study. And then 508 in the last council priority is civil division annual survey, and that's change from excellent good to strongly agree to agree, and that's just to make sure that this client satisfaction survey matches what we're saying in our survey or in our dashboard. And 513 is the unemployment rate, and once again I shared with you that they have asked to change the benchmark from college towns, which is very difficult to gather that data timely, and to change it to GPEC that has the available data for us to use. So with that, I will turn it back to Ken, I believe.
So Mayor, again, they don't have to come from the list. We calculated the totals, we gave them to you for your information, so that, and also we used it to give you feedback on the ones that rose to the top. But anything that you want to tell us that you want to focus on, we will listen to.
I first thank you guys very much. I think something to note that I think is really important is that the 5-year forecast that you presented to us, our forecast looks good with some growth, but also we also see some trends of the growth is starting to slow a little bit, and we need to be cognizant of that. There are some challenges to our budget that you have indicated, from HERF to personnel cost increase, and then all the different unfunded programs that we have in our CIP. I think it's going to be very helpful when you come back with a recommended CIP in the list of the data that we have here, combined with the information you provide us with the recommended CIP. I think that will help us guide us to where we need to go. I don't know that as we continue to prioritize our budget, our CIP, we also have, I think it's important for us, as I mentioned earlier, to look at it in its entirety. So because that will maybe move some things up and some measures up sooner rather than some other ones. And I think when we all look at our CIP information that we have before us, utilizing the START tool and utilizing the citizen satisfaction survey, and then understanding where we are budgetary wise with how much money we can spend, and here's what's recommended, and also knowing that if we move something up, something's going to have to be moved back. I think that'd be very helpful at the next meeting. I'm fine. I don't see anything rising to the occasion we have the information we have. I think the telling detail will be at the next meeting with the recommended CIP, and then how this council moves forward with certain programs and CIP opportunities based on the funds that we have and the information that we have, that you have provided for us from staff. Is that fair to say? Councilman Granville?
So, yeah, I had 2 things, but you actually reminded me of a third one. So one of the things you mentioned is you don't see anything rising to the occasion, but if to be accelerated. But if that's the case, then I don't know why we did this exercise. I mean, if the result of this exercise is carry on, then we could have scrapped all of this. We didn't need to do any of this. I mean, I think the reason that we did it is because there was the hope that we would coalesce around some consensus of not at the expense of other things, but in addition to other things being on pace, there are some things we'd like to have be ahead of pace. Not because we don't value those other things.
Respond to that. I don't disagree with that. I think there are some things that will rise to the occasion for us to accelerate. But it's hard for us to not, at this meeting, without getting all the recommended CIP from the staff with our priorities that we have, looking at everything, I don't feel like I have enough information. On here, just as you mentioned, you think that we should increase, what was it? The
tree canopy.
The tree canopy. Well, it's all important, but if you do that, not without having the recommended CIP and everything we're looking at, I think this information is very helpful for us for the overall CIP discussion and help reframe it. So I'm not saying that there will be some things that we will want to accelerate. I think that would be at our next meeting when we have the recommended CIP from staff along with our priorities.
Sure, but I think, and I could be, if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong on this, so maybe help me out here, Ken. I think one of the things that staff is looking for us to tell them is that when they review and prioritize the CIP, are there things they should say, pay extra attention to? This is the time to tell them the things they should pay extra attention to, so when we get the CIP, it's reflective of the discussions we're having right now.
Well, I think with the information they have that, but if you want to give, and if there's council consensus to move certain things up that you think, that you
Well,
we can have that
I mean,
discussion.
that's the irony.
But no one said anything, as I mentioned it
That's
up.
the irony. If there is no council consensus and the START tool is just a way for us to start a discussion, if we don't coalesce around something before we leave here today, then we're getting exactly what we were going to get, which means this process was mostly irrelevant.
I disagree with you, but that's fine. Councilmember Arredondo Savage?
So I already told you how I feel about the START tool, but I will say, I think to me, the most beneficial piece of this was actually being able to see the items. And I think it's like not just these items. That's what the problem is. I think they're just revolved around the START tool. But if there was some way that we could incorporate, Elizabeth Higgins was really nice to put these points of emphasis, and where we talk about, we gather information from not only our citizens, but our employees and our business partners, and then out in the public. And plus, I must say, you guys did a really great job the other night. Nice job last night at the library. It was a really good public presentation, so good job on that. But maybe that's where we need to look at where is there some similarities and some synergy within all those different tools, and then utilize the page when you go back, and it talks about for me to be able to see the largest gaps and the slowest growth. Did I get that right? So that's, when I did the START tool, that's kind of how I took it, was this is where we are, this is where we want to be, and geez, we really haven't made so much progress, and if we were to allocate or accelerate it, what would that look like? But if there were ones that maybe we weren't at the target point, but we were making pretty good progress, those didn't really rise to the level. So I think it's good exercise to see that with some of these items, but maybe it would be better in the sense of seeing it with ones that are recognized with all of our tools combined. So, and I will just say this, we talk about what we're going to do moving forward, and I can't really pinpoint a specific thing in the sense, but I would say this, I almost feel, looking at all the tools, it's like kind of time for us to get back to the basics. I really do feel that if our residents aren't feeling safe in their own community, that is a problem.
Right.
If our residents are very concerned about the conditions of their roads and they feel like they haven't had the attention that they need, then we need to work on that. If we have facilities, 120 buildings that are stagnant when it comes to maintenance, and there's a way that we can accelerate to make sure that they're taken care of, I mean, that is a huge asset for us, and for us to let that deteriorate is really bad. So I feel like, I look at it, I can't really tell you what I think we should pinpoint on, but in a broader picture, that's what I looked at. I looked at where the biggest gaps were. I looked at what our residents and what our business community really wanted, and try to create some synergy to find some ways in some areas that we could really focus on to make a true difference. And I do worry about putting more money on the budget long-term too. So that's another issue versus one-time money, being able to accelerate something, or actually adding money to the budget. So that was another thing that I looked at the same time. So anyway.
And to reiterate Councilman Arredondo's point, that's why I mentioned to have all the information to help make this decision is the community survey, the employee survey, the business survey, as well as the START tool to help us fund this. You have the information in front of you, what's been the emphasis. Staff and our department heads have seen the community survey points of emphasis. They've seen the START tool emphasis from the council, and they're going to help formulate the budget. And if there's something that rises to the occasion for us that we should move, we see a better opportunity to increase the emphasis to reach our goals, that's the time to do that. If we don't incorporate all the tools, I think that we're making a decision based in a vacuum without having all the information and all the data and where we are with the budget. As I mentioned earlier, you mentioned how much we are looking at for the CIP is $861 million, and It's about 10 million less than it was last year for our CAP, and of that, 74% of that was funded. So I think it's important to note that where we are in terms of the overall budget, utilizing all the tools that we have before us, you have a pretty good sense of, from the survey, from the START tool, from council, where we are heading. And then when you present it to us, we'll tell you, okay, this is something we like, or we would like to see something increase or decrease based on the funding options that we do have. Councilmember Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff, for putting this together. It's obviously very informative. Some things that, you know, just from looking at the numbers, you know, we spoke earlier about how much Tempe spends and how dedicated Tempe is to human services, but the homelessness issue is definitely trending up. So I would like to see personally increased support for either preventative or recovery programs that either exist through our community partners or exist within the city. We're talking about one later on tonight. The usefulness of the city website's a big concern of mine. It's a go-to portal for Tempeans to find out about issues, get information that they want to get about the city. So I think there's definitely a transparency issue there. You know, I'd like us to have a front and back end developer on staff. It's my understanding we do not have a webmaster on staff anymore that we used to, and I think some of the issues that we are seeing today might have been avoided if we had somebody there that would say, you know what, this is what I do professionally, and we need to do it this way a little bit differently. And not that I'm mad at staff. I've heard that staff thinks I'm mad at them about the website, Andrew, and that is absolutely not true. But I'm not disappointed either. I just want to get the thing fixed. All right. And, you know, to echo Councilmember Arredondo Savage's, you know, back to basics. Absolutely. I mean, we heard it at our town hall. They're talking about facilities, they're talking about roads, they're talking about public safety, and they're talking about infrastructure. I think those are the priorities that we need to set for the city moving forward. I hear it every day, as I know a lot of my colleagues do too. So those are the three issues that I would like to see accelerated. Thank you.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I think back to the basics could be our new theme for this next year. I completely agree with what Robin said and what Randy said. I just think that we really need to focus on the basics, making sure that our quality of life is good for our residents. The pavement quality just keeps coming up over and over again, so I really want us to work on that. Our safety in the parks. I want families to feel safe taking their children and their pets to the parks and not being harassed. And I think we really have to focus on making sure that we improve in that area. And the homeless, as far as the homeless, I really think we need to look at preventing homelessness in the first place and putting that focus towards that. Because if we can keep people out of the systems, it's so much better. And just maybe give them that Band-Aid or the leg up that they need to stay out of the homeless pool and keep their families together and have quality of life. So the prevention's really, really important. And then I think that the staff, I mean, I know that, for example, the commission, the DRC commission just had to go to once-a-month meetings, and apparently that was based on staffing levels. And I think that the staffing levels really we really need to look at that. I'm kind of talking about future budget items, but really looking at that to make sure that we have staffing levels at appropriate levels. So important commissions like the DRC can have every other week meetings opposed to once a month. That's all I had. Thank you, Mayor.
One thing I just want to, because I hear a common theme here, as a council, we do set the overreaching policy for the policy for the entire city. And I know that I have faith in our staff that they will bring us initiatives and programs to help move us towards a policy that we want them to help us implement. For example, if we give consensus as a council for a CAP to move the needle on improving the appearance of a city, and I mean, I have full faith that the city, our staff is going to help us with identifying certain projects in our CIP to help supplement the budgets that we need to reach the goal of the appearance of our city. And they're also going to help us do it in the most efficient way possible, and also take into account all the pressing needs that we have. The STAR tool, as we've been talking about tonight, will help us because of the overarching policies that we want us to move forward, that we've identified, that our residents have identified, will also help us with accelerating the programs. And I still think that I have enough faith in our staff to come back with a CIP process that will help us reach our goals. And if we're not reaching it, that's an opportunity for us to say, hey, here's some measurements where we'd like to see something increase, or if we could accelerate this area much quicker. The information is there. And I think until we look at everything in its entirety, and then this is something we can also bring up at our spring retreat that we have on the agenda, that we could also utilize that time as well to really dive down and hone in with all the data and all the policy-making tools that we have to help our staff have the best efficient CIP for our residents to achieve the quality of life that they all expect and what they all deserve. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. So, the START tool isn't everything. It's not the only tool, but it is a tool, and it's a valuable tool, and it's become more robust over time. And I really appreciate all the engagement with the community, Rosa and staff, and all of us in that process. I hear back to basics, but I also see in the START tool confirming that most of those issues are in the sort of top 14. I would note that the pre-K program, it's already sort of has the funding built in, so maybe, I don't know if it needs to be removed or it's already kind of checked off in the system, but we could argue that that's not necessarily needing to be one of the top priorities since we've already kind of gone down that road. But I would argue that if we just keep in mind this back to basics mentality, then we're not thinking about innovation, we're not thinking about a vision for the city, about where we want to end in 2040. So as a city, we've tried to adopt goals, targets for waste diversion, for recycling, for tree and shade canopy, for energy, for renewable energy, so we can be 100% renewable energy. So we have these goals that are adopted, and they're visionary goals, they're aspirational goals, but they're also goals that really are driving staff creativity, innovation, and partnerships with folks that are going to help us accomplish those goals. So when I look at the tree and shade canopy, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm not so much wanting to accelerate that goal, but I want to know, and I have faith, you guys, you're going to get us to that goal, but I need to be able to see in a time series if we're advancing from the past year. So in addition to seeing where we are baseline versus what our goal is, I need to say, have we made progress over the past year? Because otherwise, I don't know as a council member, do I want to see more funds put in or it accelerated? Because I don't know if we're on target or not. I know that we're getting close. I can see where we are, but I don't see a time series that shows us progress, unless I'm missing something.
No, because we're taking an inventory now of those
Right.
assets. Many of these performance measures are brand new.
So I know some of them are brand new,
And
but
that
in the
one is
future,
brand
we need
new,
to-
so
Right.
like I mentioned, we had an intern trying to help Craig and his team identify how we would take an inventory of those assets. And then it's really basically.
Sure, I know some of them are new, some of them are older, the recycling one's a little older.
We don't
so
have
I
the trend
realize-
data to share.
Right,
Yeah.
right, but as we move on, and this is all about, increasing our
Years to come.
performance and making the START tool more robust as well, that we can look at that. The one thing I see lagging in the START tool or our council priorities is sort of the Vision Zero goal, and I know that's something I hear spoken about a lot. We've seen a lot of,
On our agenda.
and we're going to be talking about that later. That seems to be something that's, sort of pushed downward, but when you think about public safety, nothing can be more crucial to public safety than your life on the road. So I wanted to bring that up. And obviously, affordable housing is one of our top goals because that is a community identified goal. And we know, as Mr. Mayor so ably pointed out, that if we looked at just today's present statistics, it doesn't compute all of the housing stock that's coming into the system in the next 5 years. We know it takes a long time to get from a project idea, development idea, to actual, a building that's open and rentable or saleable. So, I'm concerned that we need to keep forward with that goal. And lastly, the community engagement. I'm really proud that we have this Equity in Action program. I think it's going to be one of the most impactful programs that we do, and it's all about what Tempe is, that we want to engage in our community, and not just people, present company accepted, but you're a certain type of person that's either here because you're a staff member, or you have some interest before the council, or you're knowledgeable about what's going on, but there are a lot of people that are too busy, and they're working, and they're too busy with the day-to-day aspects of life to be here and know that even some of these issues are being discussed. I think Equity in Action is a program that just speaks to that larger performance measure of increasing our community engagement. So with that, I conclude.
Thanks. One more. Okay. Councilmember Erdana Savage.
Sorry, as he gives me a dirty look. I just want to go back. I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier to you, Mark, in regards to being able to see some of those budget items. And I just kind of wanted to let my colleagues know why I brought that up, because the vice mayor and myself and Randy have been in a working group for adaptive recreation. And I think one of the things that we realized is that the funding has never been increased. And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. That's true. And so, you know, I look at it like, you know, that's 15% of our population. And to think that we've never, you know, been able to allocate more funds to be able to increase those programs, there's just got to be a way that we can see that. So for me, that's something I think is just really important, and that's why I brought it up.
Thank you. Okay. So we look forward to recommendations. This is an ongoing CIP process. Yeah, I mean, you have our START tools, our how we rated it. We have our citizen satisfaction survey. I think what you're hearing from council is we have confidence, but we may increase certain areas or expedite the measurement goals for us in certain areas, and we'll wait to see that when we move forward. We do it, and then Mark, you guys presented the time frame of how the budget is going to go forward, and we also threw in another date that we could also use our retreat, spring retreat, as another option to discuss our CIP and some of the other operating budgets.
So Mayor, I appreciate the input, and we will be coming back to you with the recommended CIP, and we will be coming back to you with a recommended operating budget and possible supplementals. And we will base that on the best information we have. Like you said, staff is working towards those goals that you've established, and we will continue working towards those goals. We won't use the START tool as consensus from the council because that would have been a vote outside of public, and we won't use that. We use that to collect data to give to you. So I would encourage that you use that so that when we come back with our CIP and our operating budgets, that you give us feedback on that based on whatever feedback you've gotten from your colleagues or from the public or whatever. But we won't use the START tool as any consensus. I'm just making that public statement because I don't want anybody to ever say that we took a vote outside of the public view and somehow use that as consensus. We will not do that.
Andrew?
Just so before we leave the dais and we have good direction here, is there consensus direction, and we've been tracking it here, on any of the items that were discussed in either the START tool or just as a council item, to make sure that if there's something that there's a consensus interest to accelerate, that we hear that before we leave the dais, so that we could, when we say we're going to come back with the budget, we will, but if there's something that we should say, flag that tonight, that we can go ahead and do that.
One of the things, is there a way that we could, if you could come back to us, as staff come back to us with correlations with basically the business survey, our citizen satisfaction survey, and then where our priorities are. If there's a correlation there that maybe we might be able to, if staff can come back with that.
I support that idea, Mark.
Councilmember Adams?
I would like to flag the pavement management and improving the pavement management.
Mayor, to answer your question, we will send in a Friday packet the correlations between the business
That's
survey,
very helpful.
business survey, the resident survey, community survey, and the START tool that you completed. We will send you whatever correlations we can derive from that. We'll send it to you in a Friday packet.
Andrew's asking for consensus.
And the city manager's asking, is there consensus? I have a list of all of the things, but until you tell me there's consensus, I assume there's no consensus.
There's consensus on the pavement improvement, isn't there?
Until we get, I think, some of the information that we need, I'm not saying I think it's very important as well.
We know it's been at 59 for 3 years, so I don't know why we wouldn't accelerate that. Well, we're getting all kinds of complaints from residents over and over, and it's number one on the employees.
And nothing's going to prevent us at a future date to move that up as a priority for us?
Well, Andrew's asking for consensus.
I don't know.
So I
The reason
think
I
we have
ask is because
consensus.
when I've been cross-checking with Judy here, we heard that from 3 council members. That's the reason why I heard back to basics, but I also heard specifically from 3 council members, that it was pavement. But
Is there consensus on the pavement to increase that?
Well, Mayor,
Yes.
I just have a question. Look, roads is my number one thing under my Back to Basics headline here. But I just want to know, is the plan that staff is going to kind of compile some of this data and feedback and come back to us? At that point, we can make that recommendation?
That's my hope, because I think that we'll have a better sense and more information and data for us to look at. And it could very well be that whether we do it tonight or we do it the next meeting, with the information that staff's going to give us, with the correlations that I asked for, to have you come back, it's going to be in a Friday packet. That will help us guide us in our decision-making process.
But don't we have consensus on the pavement improvements?
Well, there's three, but I guess my
I would like
question
to
is,
answer your question, Councilmember.
Yeah.
Saying that there's consensus tonight doesn't mean that more money will show up in the budget.
Right.
If you give us consensus tonight that you want to accelerate that,
We're gonna-
we're going to go back to staff and say, put a plan together to accelerate that so that we can come back to city council and propose that plan. So whatever you give us consensus on tonight, we will more fully develop how we will accelerate that and come back to you with that proposal.
but you're coming back with a composition of everything you've gotten tonight thus far for a future meeting, correct?
Yes.
Which would be when?
Wait, say that again, please?
You're compiling the feedback that you've heard for we all spoke about things we want to accelerate. You're compiling that.
No.
No.
We didn't get consensus on
We
it.
haven't got
Well,
consensus
no, no,
on
no.
one item, not one, knowing that, okay,
So I just don't know I guess my question is, what's the future meeting then? What's the future
so
meeting?
we're going to have, if there are correlations between the business survey or citizen satisfaction survey, and then we're going to use our START tool. He's going to say, the staff is going to come back, help us implement the policy decisions or in the CIP based on the information that we've compiled from the citizens, from our, the business survey, and then with our recommendations with the START tools, help formulate a CIP. If there's consensus right now on any of the items that we want to move forward, we could do that. Even though they move forward, staff's going to come back with recommendations, increasing the funding for project A would be roads and streets, but then we may get something different. It's a working document, is what I'm saying.
Well, why
But if
don't we
there's
give them some
consensus now to
traction?
do that, then is there consensus right now to move forward on the quality index of our paving of our streets?
Yeah, I'm fine with
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
I'm fine
There
with
is.
that.
There is consensus. I agree. Robin agrees, Randy agrees, Jennifer agrees.
That's,
And I would say the same thing for safety.
Yep, I would
That would be
too.
the top of my list.
I agree,
I
Robin.
mean, we've heard
to
adaptive.
clarify,
Colby
Councilmember
didn't say
Arizona
anything.
Savage, are you talking about the measures involving safety in parks?
Yes.
Specifically, of the ones that were presented tonight?
There was two
There
presented,
was
quality,
two-
safety in parks, and then overall quality of feeling
Right.
safe.
And then
Safe in
both,
the
in
city.
both parks, city parks and
the
neighborhood
city.
parks.
Understood,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Okay, understood, thank you,
This is
that's
first
very
on the
helpful, thank
pavement?
you.
We already said that, Ms. Adams?
Yeah, speaking
Vice Mayor?
structure here. Yeah, so, I mean, in that case, if we're going to go to those points of direction and which performance measures, I think Councilmember Robin Arizona Savage made this very good argument about the adaptive recreation and identifying that, that's very low right now, but we've been through our working group identifying that there's a real gap, and also Vision Zero, which we're talking about later, so it's sort of hard to agree on a consensus of all of these things. We're going to talk about Vision Zero in a few minutes, but Vision Zero is also something that I would identify, and I would want consensus on that as a.
That's my point.
Yeah, no, I see it, but since we're already, I mean,
I know,
Jennifer really wanted to push that one item, so I need to be able to also. Well, you were pointing everybody out.
Okay, so right now, there's, of the information we had, there's consensus on our CIP for the quality of the pavement of our streets. And then I do know that you're compiling, if there's any correlation between the citizen satisfaction survey, the business survey, and our priorities as a council, which you already have our priorities, our strategic priorities. The START tool is to help us, guide us, if we want to fast track certain projects. When you come back, it is a working document, and nothing is etched in stone. There's going to be more bites at the apple in this as this process moves forward. And my understanding is we're going to get that information back from staff, and Ken mentioned in a Friday packet, and then we can have this at our next meeting. We also are going to, which is not in there, we can add it, the spring retreat as an item for another additional discussion from the council on our priorities for our CIP.
Thank you, Mayor, this is
Good.
helpful, we appreciate the direction.
Okay. With that, I think, can we get a 5-minute recess and come back? We're adjourned for 5 minutes. Thanks. All right, we're going to go ahead and reconvene the council meeting. Next item is our tribal gaming grant proposal. If Ms. Zilla could come forward, Marge. Welcome.
Thanks, Mayor, council members. I'm Marge Zilla, Tempe's Government Relations Officer. In item 2D, you'll find for your review the proposed tribal grant applications. As you know, Arizona state statute requires tribal communities to contribute 12% of annual gaming proceeds to local governments for public benefit purposes. The City Council, as you know, has identified 5 strategic priorities, and staff use this council direction to identify projects and programs to submit for grant funding. These include projects and programs in areas such as parks, public safety, youth, and human services, and those have been evaluated for initial and ongoing operating maintenance and capital costs. You'll see the council priority and the performance measure number in the rightmost columns in attachment A that correspond with those applications. And the proposals in the attachment total approximately $2.8 million. As you all know, none of the funding is guaranteed, and staff works on aligning the internal proposed projects with individual tribal council priorities. Now, following this meeting and discussion, staff will integrate council direction into resolutions for the respective tribes, and those resolutions will come before you for approval at the upcoming regular council meeting. And after those are approved, those resolutions will accompany the application materials as is required by the individual tribes, and we'll look forward to hearing about any awards likely in fall of this year. And I'm available for any questions.
Is there any comments or questions for Marge? So this is a great opportunity for us to advance some of our goals that we would like to see in our city with additional resources from the Indian gaming grants. And Marge just mentioned how the process works and how we rate them. We're not going to, even though we asked for 2.8, we're not going to get all 2.8. But I guess what she's asking is, are we okay with how it's presented to us? Is there anything that anyone is reaching that would like to be flagged as a council priority for us that we want to put more emphasis on? Yes, Vice Mayor Cubey.
I can't pull up the number of the bill in the legislature. Maybe you know it, Marge, but isn't there a bill that will make it a little bit easier for landlords to evict tenants?
Mayor, Vice Mayor Kuby, there is a bill, House Bill 2115, that would undercut local authority with Landlord-Tenant Act.
Yeah.
It was held on the committee of the whole calendar today.
Sure. I guess my point is that if that does come to fruition and becomes a law, could that impact the way we scored the eviction prevention? Because the eviction prevention could be more end up like, whoa, this has risen to the level of being really way more important than we even thought it was because of the law that passed. I mean, is there a way where the legislation that's passed that gets passed might impact this list and some issues, some projects might rise to the top or be changed?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, absolutely. And staff looks at what is pertinent to their individual department and what fits into those categories of being vetted for ongoing and one-time costs when they're making those proposals.
Okay, thank you.
And one thing to point out, Vice Mayor, if you look at the attachment, we were successful in receiving a grant from SRPMIC in 2016 and in 2018.
This is to continue, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, Councilman Granville.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I saw that there was an application on here for the mobile play, mobile thing. I don't know how much staff had to do with that, how much you had to do with that, but it was clear somebody was listening to us struggling with this and made it a point to understand that this is something that we had an interest in. Maybe it was a council member who got it on the list. Whoever that was, though, I appreciate that these discussions don't happen in a vacuum and they influence the kind of things that bubble up.
I agree.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. With that, next is Vision Zero. It's been highly discussed. Ms. Seiler and Julian.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Shelley Seiler, Deputy Public Works Director for Transportation.
Julian Dreesing, City of Tempe City Traffic Engineer.
So as you know, the city has adopted Vision Zero, and we have been working on that draft plan, including strategies to move the Vision Zero plan forward. Tonight, though, we're here to provide you with information on a proposed update of the distracted driving ordinance and a strategy that has been identified by the stakeholders as part of that plan. You know, there's currently legislation being proposed at the state level, and so we felt it was important to have Marge explain where that is so that you can take that into consideration as we go through our presentation.
Mayor, council members, as Shelley noted, there's some additional context for this item due to that activity at the state level. So several bills have been introduced this legislative session on the topic of distracted driving and texting while driving. The governor has publicly asked the legislature to send him something that he can sign into law on this topic. Of those proposals that were introduced, there are 3 bills that are still viable. Senate Bill 1165, House Bill 2069, and Senate Bill 1141. And I'll focus on SB 1165. That has a broad coalition of support, more stakeholder involvement. It was amended and passed out of its Senate committee yesterday, and that amendment from yesterday included some substantial timing changes. And so the initial bill had outlined that there was an education period or a grace period before enforcement of the new statewide measure. And when that grace period started, then local ordinances would no longer be in effect. However, this new amendment that was added yesterday changes this. So it outlines that local governments have additional options to either, 1, continue enforcing local hands-free ordinances until January 1st, 2021, and that's when the enforcement of the new statewide law would begin. Or 2, to amend existing ordinances to mirror the language in SB 1165 and be able to enforce those penalties during that grace period. The bill also now includes an emergency measure, which means that that education or grace period will start when the bill's signed, not later on with the general effective date. And I'll briefly mention the other 2 bills. HB 2069 passed out of a different committee yesterday. So currently that proposal is applicable for state highways only. And so some folks are seeing this as an option if SB 1165 reaches a roadblock. And then the third bill is SB 1141 that also passed out of committee yesterday, amended. And this proposal contains a broad sense of what constitutes that primary offense for distracted driving. So there have been some concerns that have been expressed that it's not clear enough for Arizona drivers to know what's allowable and what's not allowable. And I will turn it back over to Shelley to present city efforts.
Thank you, Marge. So we're here to talk today about kind of where our Vision Zero program currently is, give you a little bit of update on that, and then focus a little more on the distracted driving portion of that. So I think we're all aware of our performance measure, which is to achieve a reduction in the number of fatal and serious injury crashes to 0. Unfortunately, this morning, we lost 2 members of our community in a crash, and so it really brings home the importance of this measure and how that changes people's lives. That's potentially someone's mother, grandmother, important members of the community. So I just want, as I go through this, to remember how this affects people. Vision Zero, this is a little bit of background. I've already presented some of this, but it's kind of a different philosophy when we're talking about transportation safety, and it really takes an ethical approach towards achieving safety and really focuses on all road users. Some of the key principles being that traffic deaths and severe injuries are preventable. And that goes along with the second bullet point, that crashes will occur, but severity can be reduced. So I think this is a really important point, that there's always going to be a certain amount of human error and that crashes will happen, but these crashes don't have to result in death or serious injury. So I think that question comes up a lot where I'm talking about Vision Zero and people say, you can't eliminate crashes. And there's truth to that. But what we can make sure is when these crashes happen, that people, their lives, they don't die or that they aren't seriously injured. And finally, safety is everybody's responsibility. And historically, we've put the responsibility primarily on the driver or the cyclist or the pedestrian. But with Vision Zero, it's important to understand that we as roadway engineers play an important role in that. We're designing the system and also policymakers in the decisions that we make. I'm very excited about this map to show you that City of Tempe has been officially designated a Vision Zero city on the national level, and so we're the first and only city in the state of Arizona, and it's through the hard work and efforts that we've had to this point today. So I'm really excited to show this map and show our community that we're on our way. As far as our schedule goes, back in earlier this year, we set a specific schedule. We wanted to make sure that we didn't rush this, that we went through meeting with our stakeholders, meeting with the public, and so we had a really well-attended visioning workshop in June. We've had a lot of meetings with stakeholders within the community since then. We had a follow-up workshop in January, and we're in the process of putting that all together into a draft action plan, which we will be sharing in March. We'll have 2 public meetings. One is going to be on a weeknight, and one is going to be on the weekend, where we'll be sharing that information. Also, for those that aren't able to attend those meetings, we're going to have opportunities online to receive feedback. So we think that's a really important part of this process. We'll then be finalizing the action plan in April and have it scheduled to come back in May to share with all of you. So our action plan is very data-driven. We wanted to make sure that we're really targeting using the data and targeting areas and locations where we can have the most effect. And these 7, and there's kind of an 8th one, really rose to the top. So we're looking at distraction, bicycles and scooters, pedestrians, nighttime crashes, impairment, inexperienced and very experienced road users, intersections. We went through a lot with that one, trying to figure out where we wanted to go with that. But we think there's opportunities on both ends of the spectrum. Intersections, and then there were a few general items that didn't fall into those top 7. And for each one of these areas, we're then developing specific strategies to accomplish those goals. And an important one that really has gained a lot of attention and momentum is distraction. And so we think from city staff standpoint and these community stakeholder groups that we really can't wait much longer. We don't know what's happening at the state level, and but we do know that there's that distracted driving plays a key role in many of the crashes that are happening. I'll share some statistics in the next slide. On the bottom of the screen, I'm not going to read through all of this, but these are counties and cities and towns in Arizona that have distracted driving as a primary law, and I think that's what we're going to kind of be focusing on later in the presentation. I'll talk about the first bullet point here, and then the other information from the National Highway Transportation Safety Association, NHTSA, that speak to the effect. But in just 5 seconds, at a speed of 55 miles per hour, a car travels the length of a football field. So just 5 seconds of looking down and looking at your cell phone can cover a significant amount of distance. And so what happens in those 5 seconds is very unpredictable. That could be a child running out into the road. That could be a vehicle braking for some object in the road. It's hard to say, but the importance of having your eyes on the road and being engaged in the driving task is just so important. And so, like I said, I'm not going to read through all these statistics, but there's definitely information and data that supports the fact that distracted driving plays a role in crashes. This is our current ordinance. It's a great ordinance. The key issue with it currently, though, is the fact that it's a secondary as opposed to a primary. So with the way it's written, a police officer would have to notice unsafe behavior to the point where then they would pull over the vehicle and could cite them under this. What we're really hoping as a primary would be that you could prevent that behavior from happening initially, so that that unsafe behavior wouldn't start as a result of the unsafe use.
Councilman Granville?
So I've heard this said before, and I just want to correct it. I mean, I helped write this. On a 4-3 vote, we passed it. It's not a secondary offense. The specific discussion that we had was there are times when you can be clearly acting in a way that is credible evidence that the vehicle poses a danger, but be breaking no law. The light turns green and you don't move. You're weaving in your lane, but not out of your lane. And you can still get a ticket for that. And as a matter of fact, we got data just a while ago that 100-something people had gotten tickets for it as a primary offense. I'm not trying to cast shade on your idea. I think your idea is great. It is not a secondary offense.
So I don't disagree. I think the ordinance is very well written. This is the feedback that we've received, and we think that we can just approve upon it. And so my question then to the council is there interest in keeping the current ordinance as is or moving forward with making it more primary, and then we can speak to that point?
Councilman Keating?
My preference would be to have it be a primary offense, but are you able to speak to how enforcement would look around something like that?
So I think we're going to see a lot of people agree with that. Can we get to the presentation first?
Okay.
Because I think a lot of it was, until I just heard from Marge, and I briefly talked to Marge, was that because there was a state law moving, whatever we do was going to be preempted by state law. We can make it more strict, we just can't make it less restrictive. But since the law is not going to go into effect, they're looking at 2021 that was amended today, I believe. So then I think there is something that we need to move forward on. So I think we're going to have consensus, but let's get through this and then we can come back to that, because I do agree with you, but there's a reason why we would do it. If the legislature, because there's a current bill right now for the distracted driving that would affect what we're doing, but since it's going to be delayed, that we just found out today, I think that makes, in the interim, we should be looking at something. And I think the majority of us agree with that.
Okay, so I think at this point in the presentation, I was just hoping to get some direction. If there is interest in moving to a primary, then I would move forward in the presentation. Otherwise, if there wasn't, I don't want to waste your time.
I believe there is. Is there consensus?
I'm a
Councilman-
on that one.
So I have one comment on that is, so let's assume for the sake of argument, this isn't primary. The thing you're proposing is actually different than making it primary. You're changing it from a distracted driving, texting while driving, to a purely hands-free model, meaning I can't be talking on my phone in the car. No. Go back to the code as we had it written. That's a hands-free one. That's not a distracted driving rule. I mean, arguably, talking on your phone on the phone also distracts you. I'm comfortable with us going to that hands-free model, but I just want us to know that's what we're doing, because it's not making what you showed us is not making this primary. It is making it so that the only way you interact with your phone is with a Bluetooth headset. That's what we had before us that we were looking at. I'm fine with that, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands what that discussion is that we actually are being asked about. If I'm incorrect, please correct me, but that's the way I read it.
Yes, it would be moving to make it a primary offense for someone to be using a mobile device while driving.
The exception will help Bluetooth.
Yeah, with the exception of hands-free.
And the current ordinance does have several exceptions to it, and the hands-free is one of them. It also includes emergency responders, and we would keep those portions within the proposed ordinance language. The primary changes would be to 955A, and there were some proposed changes in D and E, but really the language that we were looking at was in section A. So Julian has put that up on the screen. So this is what was being proposed. It does mirror, in a sense, some of the language that has been proposed at the state level. We've been working on this with several stakeholders, the police department, and I think if everybody is comfortable in moving this forward, the only question that has kind of risen to a level that I think we would need your input is that the difference between just holding a mobile device or holding and actually doing something with the mobile device is something we would want your input on.
I got a question.
Yes, Councilmember
Well,
Ardano
I always,
Savage.
I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'm just personal experience, I mean, a lot of people using it for, Google Maps, and what that looks like, and when you're holding it. So, I mean, I definitely think we need to make it so people can't even utilize their phone. But not everybody's gonna have a stand to put their phone in either to do Google Maps. I guess they could just lay it down, not necessarily have to keep it in their hand. But I say, no. I say we should be way more strict.
Councilmember Keating?
Not to disagree with my esteemed colleague. Yeah, I'm like 55% to not, make it an offense to be on the phone while driving. I mean, texting I think is one thing while you're looking down and you're doing this thing, and I've never done it, but I'm sure a lot of people have. To be.
You just showed how you do it.
I've seen it on TV.
Oh, okay.
Movies and stuff, YouTubes. Anyway, so I'm willing to be moved off that position if there's a public safety, like if there is data to say that doing this kind of thing is as dangerous as doing this kind of thing, then I could be moved off that. But right now I'm not quite there. So I look to you as experts to push me in that direction if that's the case.
And I don't have the specific data on it, but I've heard that distracted driving is not too dissimilar from drunk driving in that sense, because the brain and the eyes are not focused on the driving task, and so as much as we try to multitask, it's very difficult for our brains to actually do that. And one thing to point out as far as Councilmember Ardano's question about like Google Maps, one thing that this does mirror at the state level is that section 28-645A3 and section 28-851, that relates to being stopped at a red traffic signal or at a train. So in those situations, you would be able to use your device in a stopped position.
Yeah. Councilmember Adams?
That's right, because you'll get honked
Then
at.
Vice Mayor, and then Councilmember Granville.
Yes, I'm a big proponent of safety first, and I think that we need to really err on the side of safety in this case. And I know, Randy, I want to get you off that 55% and get you to 100%, and have it be not holding a mobile device at all while in traffic.
Vice Mayor Cubey?
So my trusty aide, policy aide, Kristen Gwynn, looked up some statistics from the Fatality Analysis Reporting System, and it says that primary distracted driving laws lead to 11% decrease in traffic fatalities among drivers 15 to 21, and significant reductions among drivers 21 to 64. And I believe those most distracted driving laws we're talking about are hands-free. I mean, there's still the opportunity, you can still have the phone on, the voice on. So with Google Maps, you can still have the Google Map telling you what to do, but you have two hands on the wheel and you're focused on driving. So that's why the power of having that law is to have your hands be free and not be holding a phone. So I just wanted to support that we should go that way. And I also want to thank you, staff, because Councilmember Granville and Councilmember Adams and I wanted to bring this forward as a working group, and we thought, well, it'll take us 6 months, a year, and you guys snapped to it before we even could bring it to your list of tasks. You were already on it on your own, and so I really appreciate that you've been so proactive in this.
Councilman Granville.
I would just say, if it helps Councilmember Keating get off the fence at all, when we were doing the initial research about distracted driving, one of the things that we found was that AAA found that driving while messing with your phone was 8 times more dangerous than driving legally drunk, which is why I was surprised it was a 4-3 vote at the time, but I understand that's the way it goes. Now, certainly maybe that data isn't correct. It may not apply to looking at Google Maps. It may not apply to talking on your cell phone. I don't know. But I know, at least for the texting while driving part of it, or playing Angry Birds or whatever you're doing, that was one for sure.
Councilman Keating.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to be clear. I'm fully in support of no texting while driving. Like, absolutely, absolutely. And my 55% thing was, hey, am I on the phone and am I still driving? Is that still as dangerous? What I'm hearing and what statistics are being texted to me right now, is that yes, that it is. So I am in support with, sounds like the unanimous decision of our colleagues here in moving forward with this. Thank you.
I think you could say there's consensus to move forward with the proposed ordinance that you have in section 19-55.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
So we'd go to 2 reads, and then when would would actually take effect, assuming it wins council support?
We will be submitting to Brigida tomorrow the proposed resolution. It would go next week. And then I believe there's an emergency clause as part of it that would make it effective. Help me out, anyone?
It would only require 1 hearing, and if you adopted it with an emergency clause, it would go into effect immediately.
Okay. We're good with that?
Well, may I ask, there also is going to be a public education aspect to this, and I'm assuming communications would be involved in trying to relay all this information to the community.
Definitely. With a change like this, we would want to get it out to the community and do our normal education pieces to them, so for sure.
It just doesn't matter, but the accident that happened on Southern, was that caused by?
We don't have confirmation on that.
All right, thank you. Next item, future agenda items. Seeing none? Oh,
We do have,
Vice Mayor Kuby.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
We still have our other.
I don't have the list of future agenda items. We do have one about the council communicator system and updating that, and I don't think it has a specific date for it. Do we have a specific date for having IRS for that? Or can we get closer to a specific date?
I'm going to ask Andrew. Under future agenda items, Vice Mayor Kuby is asking, do we have a specific date for a council communicator future agenda items that's supposed to be scheduled, Brigida or Andrew?
Looking at a new software. I think it's listed as a future agenda item. It just doesn't have a date assigned.
It doesn't.
I believe staff was going to prepare a Friday packet memo in the next couple of weeks and then schedule a presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember
That's my
Granville.
recollection.
You know, we've had a bunch of various water rebate things go into effect. Staff just put out a video on the tree rebate thing, so people didn't have to go to the classes. If we could either have just a brief presentation or Friday packet works fine for me, just sort of outlining our various rebates and how successful they are so that we can look at the ones that we might want to emphasize or the ones that we might want to promote or the ones that maybe just nobody uses and we need to evaluate, just to get a sense of where those various water conservation rebates are.
I think a Friday packet would be suffice. Okay. Councilmember Ardano Savage.
You know what, Mayor? I would like to, I know Councilmember Adams and I were talking in regards to water rates. And I know that we've had some updates. I've had an opportunity to talk with Holly, and she had some really good ideas in regards to some different ways that we could really address the large lot users. So, I mean, we would love for that to be, I mean, I know our agendas are really big, so I thought if we threw it out there now, maybe that would be something that we could land on and really have that robust discussion. Because that was one thing that we talked about that we would do, and we haven't had the opportunity to do that.
Great.
May I, Mr. Mayor? So we do have our water and drought resilience working group, Bill. Can't we address it in that context and bring it back to council? No, I'm saying bring it back to council, but that's why we've established a working group to deal with that. Separate issue in that.
I think it's a separate issue in that we talked about the water rates for many months, like I think back in April now, and we were going to bring forward more information just specifically for the water rates. That was my understanding. Some of it was before I was on council, Robin, so.
And I was the one that actually made the motion and put it in the wording within the, yeah, it was actually in the motion, so I feel like I really want to see it through. That's okay.
But we also, I mean, by council, we had a water rate study, and we have water rate studies every 2 years. So are you suggesting
It's not
that
about
we
the water rate study, it's about the impact to the large lot users and what we were going to do to be able to alleviate their specific, so it's something very specific.
Well, again, I have to push back because in our working group, we are actually talking about the outreach efforts that we're working on with even the rainwater homeowners association, for example. We're talking about those specific groups and how we can better target them with our
But see,
our
that's
water
the
staff.
problem, because that's not what the discussion was about. It wasn't about getting them to get into, you know, maybe conversion or do things like that, or use smart meters, because a lot of them have already done that. So it's really about looking at the rates and seeing how we can adjust it fairly, and maybe even giving some type of certification where they would actually get a discount if they fulfilled these certifications. You know, they did
Again, we
everything
have-
right, they've done everything by the book, everything that we've asked them to do, but, you know, they have large lots. They came to this town and they bought a large lot, and that's what they wanted to do, and I think that we need to honor that. So I say no, I want to do it this way.
So, I mean, I think you are relitigating the water rates, which were decided upon in council, and we had many, many public hearings and many.
But they weren't, that it was part of, let's get it back. Let's actually look at the way it was read into the record and how it was voted on. Let's do that. We don't have to do it right now, but we can do it in the future if that's fine. Please.
Okay. So the question is, they want to come back, and are you looking for clarification on what the motion was, Councilmember?
Not a motion, this is usually a time when council members can ask for
Future agenda
presentation,
items.
future agenda items, presentation staff. My understanding is that 2 council members have requested a water rates, bringing back water rates specifically with respect to large lot users. Yes, that's the emphasis of the presentation, is the impact on large lot users and how staff.
Not just the impact, but also we had talked about.
Ideas to address it. Ideas to address
We got
it.
that information.
Okay.
But we don't have any water rate studies out yet, and there is a rate that's already set. So I think you're getting clarification on what the motion, the original, like the information. Okay.
Okay, the only other piece I would want to know is, yeah, understood, and we'll look at that. I'm just saying for the presentation purposes, I mean, I'm looking at is it a 30-day, 60-day, when? Okay.
30 days?
I'd be comfortable with 30 days.
But it would be
you,
March
Robin?
21st, which is already a full agenda. I guess I was asking for maybe April 4th?
That's fine.
April.
April 4th? Okay. April 4th.
Rikita?
All right.
Okay, with April 4th? Yeah, I know you may not worry about it by then, but, okay. Does it really? We could prolong it. Okay. All right. Next item on our agenda is our call to the audience for the committee of the whole items listed under section 4A. Audience members have up to 3 minutes to address the council. If you'd like to speak on an item, please fill out a speaker's card, which can be found in the back of the council chambers. When it is your turn, I will call your name. I do have one card. Mr. Glenn Spencer, you've been patiently waiting. Please come forward, state your name and place of residence for the record.
My name is Glenn Spencer. I live in Phoenix. I'm the executive director of Aunt Rita's Foundation, and looking forward to the AIDS Walk this weekend. Mayor Mitchell, I know that you'll be presenting to the crowd, and Vice Mayor Kuby, I know that you're registered, and Councilmember Adams also. And I invite all of the council members to be there. So this initiative that the Tempe Pride consideration that you're making is really to join a community of cities, to join the Fast Track City Initiative to really make a commitment to help end HIV. And the beauty of this initiative is that you're making a commitment to collaborate with existing community programs like Aunt Rita's Foundation and like the 13 partner organizations with whom we fund and partner that are already delivering critical HIV prevention programs. I've had the opportunity to already meet with Tempe Human Services programs, as well as Tempe other staff, meeting with Mountain Park Health Center officials, and sort of already speaking with them about what things that can be done in the city of Tempe. HIV is not over. Our new rates of infection have increased 35% since 2011 in Arizona. And in the same time period nationwide, they've decreased 10%. Maricopa County has been identified as one of the counties nationwide by the CDC that has a high incidence of HIV. So with Tempe becoming a global, joining this global initiative of Fast Track City, it would be the 20th city in the nation to have made that commitment, 20th. Second in the state, but 20th in the nation. And so City of Phoenix signed on to this initiative 2 years ago, and we are extremely hopeful and extremely excited to work with you and work with the different departments in the City of Tempe and the different community members in Tempe to really genuinely help make a difference and collaborate with you in tandem. And hopefully, with your voice and your leadership, this can amplify the issue to promote HIV testing, HIV treatment, and help to eradicate stigma that is really getting in the way of us ending this epidemic. We have all the prevention tools necessary. It's 100% preventable, and it's 100% treatable. So it's leadership that we need, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Glenn.
Sure.
I do have one more card. Mr. Mark Allen. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Mark Allen, Phoenix, Arizona. Do you need the mailing address?
No.
Okay. I just thought about this while I was sitting there. You guys were talking about the texting and distracted driving. We have a system in place for the emergency broadcast network for storms, haboob, silver alerts, amber alerts. It could be helpful for the council to investigate whether or not it's possible to tap into that location-based text messaging service to allow the citizens in Tempe to know that there's no text messaging while driving.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address us under committee of the whole items? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, we'll close that portion. Next item on our committee of the whole is our Tempe Pride. And I'm looking at my agenda. One of the things you've heard Glenn talk about what Tempe Pride means, and I just want to tell you that the city of Tempe values all of our residents, and we want to help ensure that a high quality of life for everyone in our city. In Arizona, I believe, and Glenn can probably correct me if I'm wrong, there's over 8,000 individuals that have cases of HIV and AIDS. And by becoming a fast-track city, Tempe will establish many partnerships with community groups like Aunt Rita's Foundation. We all can work towards the end this disease. And as Glenn mentioned, there is a walk this Saturday, the AIDS walk, and I'm gonna pull it up here real quick. It's from, well, I'm supposed to be there at 3, but it's at 4:30, and it was at Tempe Beach Park. So it's about 4:30 to about 6:30, I think the walk is. We look forward to seeing everyone there. Is there any comments or discussion from the council on trying to become a fast-track city? Yes, Vice Mayor Cubey.
So first of all, I want to thank Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Adams for their work on this group, and to thank you so much for Glenn Spencer, for coming to us with your ideas, and also thank a young man, Benjamin Steele, do you know him, from ASU, who was tugging on our coats about this issue about 2 years ago, and I can't wait I think he's in Austin, Texas now, of all places, right? They're probably a fast-track city, because I know he led Phoenix to become a fast-track city. So I wanted to just mention, and thank you for all your support, and mention that Rosa and the Department of Strategic Management has agreed to take ownership of the initiative. This isn't just a resolution we're going to pass or that you're going to sign, Mr. Mayor. This is an interdepartmental working group is going to oversee our pathway to these new goals and identify a lot of community partners. And thank you so much for mentioning Mountain Park, because they're so chief and so central in our goals towards a healthier community. So, and there's no financial risk with this request. That's a good thing. We're not asking for any funds. And any identified costs that come up will, of course, be brought before the council and for approval. So we're simply asking that you allow Mayor Mitchell to sign the dotted line and make Tempe the next fast-track city.
Everybody good?
Everybody's good.
Councilmember Adams?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. There is consensus to move forward with that. Any other comments or discussion on that item? Seeing none. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Glenn. Next item is Tempe Works, formerly known as the Day Worker Program. Councilmember Key.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been a long night, so I have I have thank yous to say, and I have a sales pitch to make. So what I'm going to do is say my thank yous, and I'm going to forego the sales pitch, assuming we have consensus. But if we don't, then I'll go into it, and I'll keep you all here all night. So, I want to thank, first of all, the working group, Councilmember Arredondo Savage and Councilmember Navarro, for their help in this innovative program. Our community partners, Tempe Community Action Agency and Corporate Job Bank, have been fantastic, and Tony Miano. If there's ever been a champion on staff for this program, it's Tony. So without all of which that I have mentioned, we wouldn't even be at this point today. But what I am asking for is to put in a supplemental request into the budget to expand the Tempe Works program. How it works is there are, we did a 2-year pilot, which we'd give a full-time job and services to a homeless individual within the city, and with the hopes that they would take that opportunity, take those services, and be able to then carry them forward and get on a path of self-sufficiency. It's part of the homeless recovery efforts that I alluded to earlier. What this would do is expand that bandwidth. So if we've had 2 seats available as the bandwidth, and in that 2 years, 6 total people have benefited from the program. What this would do is it would increase that bandwidth to 10 total seats. And it would also increase some of the services offered, such as a lot of the jobs that are required, like in the Parks Department, for example, where we want to get these people into employment opportunities, require a driver's license. So it would offer things like driver's ed, whereas the pilot program did not. So, if there's consensus to put this in and let it compete, I would appreciate it.
Can I have a really quick comment?
Councilmember
Yeah,
Arredondo Savage.
I just want to say thank you to Councilmember Keating, because, he's really done a lot of the heavy lifting, and it was just last week I was in DC, and I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people on the Hill about this program, and people are very interested, and I think for us to be able to think about it as a sustainable program and something that we do, I mean, we always need to make sure, we always talk the right talk, but I think we need to walk the talk too. So I think this is a really good opportunity for us to create something sustainable, hopefully, in the future. But I get it. I mean, it needs to weigh out, and it needs to be part of the bigger picture, and I think we're fine with that. But at the same time, I think people realize, I mean, this is a great incubator for people that have been out of the workforce for a long time, to get back in, to learn some of those skills, not just, the hard skills of the job, but also soft skills at the same time. And then to have those wraparound services. I mean, it's so hard to make connections with people, but this is something that's really solid. So again, I just want to thank all those people that have been involved, Naomi and your team, everybody sitting right there. You guys have done a really great job, and hopefully it's something that will continue in the city.
Okay, Councilman Granville?
Yeah, so my first thought when I saw this was like more starfish, just more people to help, right? And that's, I'm perfectly fine with this. Candidly, you're not going to come up with a number that shocks my conscience of what you want to grow this program to. It's so much. One, it's a humane thing to do, but it's also just a fiscally responsible thing to do. Like, we're talking about $250,000 to patrol people in parks when we could just as well be putting these people to work so they're not living in a park. And so, yeah, you could come back as many times as you want with whatever staff thinks that they can integrate into their system, and I'm fine with that.
All right, so there's direction to move forward.
One more thing.
Yeah, Vice Mayor?
I just want to thank Randy. This is not just a passion project, but you have a lot of expertise in this issue, and just thank you so much, and thank you, Robin, for serving on the working group. And is it Joel as well? Yep. Thank you so much for all your leadership.
All right, consensus to move forward with a supplemental to compete with the overall budget. Next item is volleyball courts in the north side of Tempe Town Lake. Councilman Navarro's not here. Who's on that committee with him? Anybody?
I'm on that committee with Councilmember Navarro, but I know better, and so I'm going to give it to an expert.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Craig Hayton, Parks Manager. I appreciate the opportunity to seek direction tonight for the volleyball courts on the north side of the Tempe Town Lake. This has been a concurrent conversation with the master planning process. So they've been parallel as we've been having this conversation. So they've really this conversation has fallen in line with the development of the master plan. And specifically with the activity zones, as we've discussed, volleyball is an appropriate use, but also looking at some of the guiding principles, trying to blend in active uses within the park as well as some of the passive uses, but also seeing that the Rio Salado has historically been an event center, but also trying to work in some daily use as well to really balance out the event uses as well. So understanding of some of the comments earlier on, that volleyball, sand volleyball is really a growing sport at really every age level, and whether it's drop-in play for folks who just want to show up at park to utilize it, or the really highly programmed and even event-driven volleyball tours that are out there. It's a really well-balanced look, as well as some of the other beach sports that have really developed over the last few years along with that. Public comments and letters of support really have reinforced the interest not just in beach volleyball specific or generally, but also at the Rio Salado as a central location in town, and also supporting with multiple courts to the north side of Tempe. Our current inventory at the Tempe Town Lake on the north side, just east of the Mill Avenue bridges, includes 4 courts that are faced east-west currently. Kiwanis Park is the only other location within Tempe that has more than 2 courts in one place, and there's 7 there, but they're split throughout 3 different areas of the park. So this is our largest gathering currently, but they are, from what we've heard through public feedback, through research, through talking to experts, they're not the most ideal layout, whether it's an east-west orientation, the quality of sand, the lack of lighting, the drainage concerns that are in the area. They're not really meeting standards for current use, but also for wanting to expand the use beyond and really attract potential leagues, some club teams. What we have come up with just a general idea is reorienting some courts on the east side, adding some additional courts. These courts are actually spaced for tournament play. Doesn't mean you couldn't add more courts in with an underground sleeving system, increasing the quality of the sand, adding some lighting. There's a good chance of needing some restroom facilities on site. That would be one option. And then the possibility of a second phase over on the west side to add additional courts, which could bring in a larger tournament, something that could host more people and make it more competitive as a site. So as I mentioned kind of as a preface, the goal really was to have a concurrent conversation with the master plan process. So this is something that as staff will come back coming up this spring with a larger implementation plan for the Rio Salado as a whole. Our request here tonight is for council consideration to include the enhancement and expansion of sand volleyball courts on the north side of the Tempe Town Lake as part of that implementation plan. So really consideration as we have this conversation coming up in the next couple of months.
Any comments or discussion? Vice Mayor?
I guess I'll go. I'm generally not supportive of this. Can I ask you a question? When is the volleyball season?
So at Kiwanis, the courts are packed most of the year that I've seen. So I don't know the specifics on when school seasons are in. I'm not sure if you've heard, Keith.
$4 million project.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Kuby. The volleyball season just depends as far as inside or outdoor play, but it is year-round. As the gentleman talked about earlier, the sand volleyball play that goes on the club level can go concurrently with the school year play, which is basically usually in the fall.
Right. So, one thing that stands out to me very starkly is sort of the lack of shade and how, it is sort of difficult to have shaded elements and trees in the middle of a court. I realize that's not going to happen, but there's other ways to get shade, of course, but it just concerns me the use of this space on a lot of space, especially with the projected phase 2. And while there may be creation of tournament play, I don't see how this benefits generally the residents who already feel like Tempe Town Lake is being taken away from them in bits and pieces, and there aren't enough public uses. And I just think that I just don't really support it. I don't know about the rest of my colleagues, but I would not want to see it move forward.
Councilmember Adams?
Yes, I'm supportive of the volleyball courts. It's a great exercise, and we all need more exercise. And also, I think it is a value to the community because residents get to know one another, they play together, it builds community and neighborhoods.
Anyone else have any comments? Question, is this part of the Rio Salado urban plan as well?
It is listed within the Rio Salado the Rio Salado is broken down into 10 activity zones.
Okay.
This is consistent with the activity zones of.
So what's
where
the
it would fall.
ask? Like, this could be included in the Rio Salado master plan, or it's obviously going to be competing with a whole bunch of other projects?
Absolutely. We wanted to be very careful not to have an ask before we would present the entire implementation plan, so that it didn't
So
seem like
this is
we're
something as
coming
a placeholder, if you will, for the Rio Salado master plan. And within the Rio Salado master plan, there's could be a lot of things based on funding and how we could get that accomplished.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this, Mayor, one of the main pieces is just the proximity to that conversation, understanding these have been concurrent. We just wanted to make sure that this wasn't something that we stacked upon that plan at the same time, so that you're aware that this work was going on and that we would have that conversation come
Yeah,
up.
and if there's a way to incorporate this as part of the Rio Salado plan as well.
We certainly will come back, depending on
Okay.
what our recommendations are, they may include this.
Councilmember Granville?
Yeah, so I served on this committee with Councilmember Navarro. He did the heavy lifting. I was as much moral support as anything else. But I do want to at least speak on his behalf a little bit. As was mentioned, we already saw the Rio Salado master plan. This section of the Rio Salado master plan had volleyball called out on it already. And so the thing that this is really brought back, it might seem odd that we're bringing it back. Like, why come back for a yes when you've already got a yes? Because it's already in the Rio Salado master plan. I think the thing that Councilmember Navarro was thinking by bringing this back, and once this is done, this will close out the committee, is my understanding, is that this or something like this or something that staff determines is comparable or similar will eventually come back in the more refined version of the Rio Salado master plan, but it will compete with other ideas, just as you stated. And so it might be that staff thinks that a shade structure is better there, or something, I don't know, whatever, a rock wall is better there, or whatever. Because certainly what we don't want to do is build something now and then find out that it limits our choices for 7 other things that were planned in that area, right? It has to be built it has to be planned as a whole system, so you're not excluding choices by doing one thing. I think what Councilmember Navarro's hope was by bringing this back was that he would get an affirmation of the Rio Salado master plan having volleyball courts here, a reaffirmation from council, and that when it did come back later, this would be something that we remembered that we had reaffirmed.
Yes, Councilmember Iredano.
I don't remember, I remember them being volleyball courts. I don't remember there being as big of an area for volleyball courts, so I think this is obviously an expansion of what the original intent of the volleyball area was. Am I right with that?
There's a stadium listed on the west side of the courts, and then there is where the existing courts are. It was listed on one of them for existing uses as well over there.
So the addition is the ones to the east, or
the ones on the east are already there and were labeled there, and then there was the possibility of adding some stadium course, I think, for lack of a better term, over on the other side.
Well, I mean, I guess, I'm fairly kind of neutral in both ways on this, because I can see, I love amateur sports, and I think it'd be really great if that's something that we could do. But I think, this may not happen for a while, so you got to be able to be open to what may come in a year or two, because it's really expensive to be able to do that. So you don't want to create something that's never going to be done. But my thought is because it does take so much up of these guys, hey, talking. Jeez, I'm saying really good things. But I'm just saying on that, exactly, right?
We're like, yeah, Rob.
Yeah, Robin's like, she's not even listening. So, but my only thought is because it takes up so much of the lake bank that when it's not being used for tournament play, that it can be used for other, maybe families could go there and hang out, or maybe there is an ability for uses outside of just being a volleyball venue. Because I've seen it at the Kiwanis, but it's not always used. I mean, there's been times I go by and it's empty, and because it's fenced in, you can't really use it for anything else. So
There's a lot of courts there. The Fiesta thing?
Yeah,
there's some,
three.
there's like, what, 4?
There are 3 at Fiesta specifically.
Yeah.
And we've made some.
Is that by the softball fields?
It is, yeah. Right off.
As long as it
Highway.
competes with other things, I mean, I like the idea of it being a possibility, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key is that it's going to compete with
Yeah.
other projects within the Rio Salado master plan. That's fine.
We understand that.
Yes, Councilmember Granville?
Just add one footnote to this. One of the things that Councilmember Navarro was very interested in is the reason why there's so much sort of sand space on the west side is because there are other sand sports that he was interested in for exactly the reason you're talking about, whether it's sand soccer. There were 2 or 3 other sports that were sand-based sports. I don't remember them all. And so that's why the courts don't stop, the SAM doesn't stop at the court. But again, at this point, it's all theory. When we actually have that larger discussion, it may or may not look like this, or it may not compete well, candidly.
Okay. I think we're good with that.
Yep.
All right. Next item is items for council consideration. We do not have any items in progress. Anybody have any items in progress? Upstairs. With that, I only have, Mr. Manager, do you have any announcements?
No announcements tonight, thank you.
The only thing I just want to announce is the first spring training game is this Saturday, and then the City of Tempe game is on Monday. So hopefully, I know it's a little cold out there, but spring training is right around the corner. And then also, don't forget, this weekend is also the start of the Hayden Ferry Days. And we also have the Empty Bowls, which starts this Friday, tomorrow, as well as we have it at our library complex on Saturday. We look for everyone to be there and to also attend the, if I can open this, Hayden Ferry Days on Saturday. Empty Bowls is at the library complex from 11 o'clock till about 2:30. And then we also have the AIDS Walk that was mentioned earlier at Tempe Beach Park. That starts around 4:30. And we wish everyone a great weekend. Stay dry, be safe. Do not text and drive. With that, our next meeting is March 21st. We are adjourned, and we have a meeting upstairs we need to conclude.